Hey everyone, welcome back to Nightmare Reads. Tonight, we're entering the lonely and unpredictable world of long-haul truckers, where empty highways, isolated rest stops, and relentless rain can hide things no driver expects to find. For this special compilation, we've brought together 8 true, atmospheric trucker horror stories made for those long, late-night drives. Before we begin, subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy realistic, grounded horror. Now, turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and let's get into tonight's stories. My name is Dave Mercer, and I'm writing this from the sleeper of my truck at a pilot outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It's raining tonight. Not hard, but steady enough that every drop tapping against the aluminum roof sounds exactly like it did that night. I've been driving commercially for a little over 12 years. Most of that time, I've hauled dry van freight across Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and California. When you spend enough nights alone on the road, you eventually see things you can't explain. Deer standing perfectly still on the shoulder. Cars that appear in your mirrors but never pass. Strange lights moving across empty desert where there shouldn't be a house for 50 miles. Most of the time, there's a reasonable explanation. Exhaustion, reflections, road crews working somewhere beyond the hills. Your eyes playing tricks on you after staring at the same 2 strips of pavement for 6 straight hours. That's what I used to believe. Anyway, what happened to me began in March during a run from Reno, Nevada to a distribution center outside St. George, Utah. I was pulling a sealed 53-foot dry van loaded with boxed household appliances. Nothing valuable enough to attract serious cargo thieves, but enough weight behind me that the trailer handled badly in strong wind. The weather had been ugly since I left Reno. Cold rain, hard crosswinds, and low clouds pressing down over the highway. Every time another 18-wheeler passed, a wall of dirty spray covered my windshield and blinded me for a second or two. By midnight, I was running on fumes. My electronic log still showed a little over 2 hours on my drive clock, but physically, I was done. My shoulders ached, my eyes felt gritty, and I had already drifted onto the rumble strip twice. I planned to shut down at the next decent truck stop. The problem was that every parking app showed the nearby lots as full. My wife, Melissa, had texted me about an hour earlier. Our youngest daughter needed braces, and the first payment was due at the end of the month. I remember staring at that message while parked at a small pullout, doing the math in my head. Fuel, insurance, the truck payment, the orthodontist. That's probably why I didn't question the assignment when it came through. At 12:47 in the morning, the company tablet mounted beside my dash made the sharp notification sound we used for urgent dispatch messages. The screen showed a new assignment. The sender was listed only as Dispatch 4. That should have bothered me immediately. Our regular night dispatcher was a guy named Carl. On weekends, it was usually a woman named Tasha. Every message in our system showed a dispatcher's name, or at least their initials. I had never seen one identified by a number. The message read, Driver 2187 Priority Recovery Load. Pickup, Oak Haven Transfer Facility. Distance, 21.6 miles. Drop A&D hook. Additional pay, $650. I read that last line twice. $650 for a short recovery load was unusually good. But recovery jobs sometimes paid well, especially when a customer was angry or another driver had abandoned equipment. I sent a message asking whether I was supposed to deliver my current trailer first. The response came almost immediately. No, bring current load to facility. Further instructions on arrival. I didn't like that. My trailer was sealed, and the bills of lading clearly listed St. George as the destination. Rerouting a sealed customer load without updated paperwork could get a driver fired. I asked for a confirmation number. A 6-digit code appeared on the screen. Then, Dispatch 4 called through the tablet. The voice sounded male, probably middle-aged, but the connection was terrible. A faint crackling followed every word, like he was calling from a room filled with old radios. Dave, you copy? Yeah, I copy. Who is this? Night operations. We need you at Oak Haven. I'm under a sealed load. We're aware. What exactly am I recovering? There was a pause. Not a normal pause like someone checking a computer. It was completely silent for nearly 5 seconds. Then he said, "A trailer." What trailer number? Another pause. It'll be marked. That answer made no sense. Every trailer in our fleet had a unit number. Dispatch would never send a driver into the middle of nowhere without one. What's your name? I asked. The crackling became louder. Proceed to the coordinates, driver 2187. Then the call disconnected. I should have called Carl using the regular company number. I should have pulled over and verified everything. Instead, I looked again at the extra pay and thought about my daughter's braces. I accepted the assignment. The coordinates took me off Interstate 15, near the Nevada-Utah state line. I had driven that stretch dozens of times, but I had never noticed the exit before. There was no gas station sign, no town marker, just a narrow ramp cutting away from the highway between 2 rocky embankments. As I approached, my GPS told me to turn right. The exit sign was so faded that I could barely read it through the rain. Oak Haven, 18 miles. The metal was covered in rust, and one corner hung loose from the post. The moment I left the interstate, the road surface changed. The pavement became cracked and uneven, with weeds growing through the center line. After about 5 miles, the yellow markings disappeared altogether. My headlights caught old utility poles running beside the road, but there were no wires attached to them. The rain grew heavier. It hammered against the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Water filled the potholes, making it impossible to judge their depth. Every few minutes, one of my steer tires dropped into a hole hard enough to shake the entire cab. I slowed to around 25. There was nowhere to turn a 70-foot rig around, so I kept going. After another 10 minutes, I tried calling dispatch. No service. That wasn't unusual in that part of the desert, but the company tablet used a different network and usually maintained at least a weak connection. Its signal icon was empty too. The only thing still working was the route Dispatch 4 had uploaded. A blue line continued across the screen, guiding me deeper into the darkness. Around 1:30, I saw the first building. It was a small concrete structure beside the road, maybe an old way station or guard booth. Its windows were broken, and part of the roof had collapsed. Someone had spray painted a warning across the front wall. The rain distorted the letters, but I could still make out 3 words. Road closed ahead. I stopped. The engine idled beneath me while rain drummed against the cab. My GPS said the facility was less than 2 miles away. I considered backing up, but the road behind me curved sharply, and both shoulders had turned to mud. Reversing a loaded rig that far in the dark would have been asking for trouble. I grabbed the CB microphone. Any driver on this road got their ears on? Only static answered. I tried again. This is Unit 2187 near Oak Haven. Anybody copy? For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then a voice came through, very faint. 2187. I sat up straighter. Yeah, this is 2187. Go ahead. The radio hissed. Then the voice said, "You took it too." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Who is this? No answer. Driver, what's your 20? More static. Then I heard what sounded like a truck horn, distant and warped by the signal. The transmission ended. I stared at the CB for a long moment. It could have been some driver messing with me. Truckers say strange things on the radio all the time, especially in the middle of the night. Still, I left the microphone in my lap. I continued down the road. About a mile later, the pavement ended completely. The gravel was soft and badly washed out. My trailer wandered from side to side behind me, forcing me to correct constantly. Then my headlights swept across a chain link fence. Beyond it stood the largest abandoned building I had ever seen. It looked like an old freight terminal, long enough to hold 20 or 30 loading bays. The roof sagged in several places. Half the dock doors were hanging open, and the entire building was dark. Dead grass surrounded the property. No parked cars, no security lights, no fresh tire tracks. Only one section of the gate stood open. My tablet announced, "You have arrived." I stopped outside the entrance. The blue route vanished from the screen. For a second, the assignment page remained visible. Then the text flickered, and the manifest disappeared. Not minimized. Not closed. Gone. The tablet returned to the regular dispatch screen, where my original Reno to St. George load was still active. There was no recovery assignment, no confirmation number, no message history from dispatch 4. I refreshed the system twice. Nothing. That was when I finally accepted that something was seriously wrong. I put the truck in reverse. The transmission indicator blinked but stayed in neutral. I tried again. Nothing. An error message appeared on the dash. Shift inhibited. That sometimes happened if the truck wasn't completely stopped, or if there was pressure on the transmission. I set the brakes, released them, and tried again. Still nothing. Then my trailer moved. Not much. Just one quick shake, like someone had grabbed the rear doors and pulled on them. I checked the passenger side mirror. All I saw was rain sliding down the white wall of the trailer. Then I looked into the driver's side mirror. At first, I thought the dark shape near the back was a fence post. Then it stepped closer. A person was standing beside my trailer doors. He wore a long coat that hung almost to his ankles. It was too dark to see his face, but I could tell he was looking directly at the seal on the door latch. My first thought was cargo theft. I hit the air horn. The blast echoed across the empty property. The figure didn't even flinch. He slowly raised one hand and placed it against the rear door. Then, the CB radio came alive beside me. "Don't open it." I grabbed the microphone. "Who are you?" "Don't let them open it." The voice sounded clearer now. It was a man, breathing hard. "Who's behind my trailer?" The radio crackled. "Drive. I can't get it in gear." "Release your trailer brake." I looked down. Both brake valves were pulled out. Why? Just do it. Everything I had ever learned told me not to release the trailer brake while someone might be standing behind the rig. But the person in the mirror was now moving his fingers around the door latch. The security seal was still in place, but he was pulling at it. I pushed in the red trailer brake valve while keeping the tractor brake engaged. The trailer rolled backward a few inches. The figure stepped away. At that exact moment, the transmission indicator changed from neutral to reverse. I didn't hesitate. I released the tractor brake, backed away from the gate, and turned the wheel hard enough that the trailer nearly dropped into the ditch. The figure remained beside the entrance. As my headlights swept across him, I caught a brief look beneath the hood of his coat. There was something pale where his face should have been. Maybe it was a mask. Maybe it was rain reflecting off his skin. I honestly don't know. I shifted into drive and floored it. My tires spun on the wet gravel before catching. As I accelerated, something struck the back of the trailer. Once, then again. The impact was hard enough that I felt it through the seat. I kept driving. In my mirrors, the abandoned terminal disappeared behind the rain. Then, headlights appeared back there. At first, they were far away. 2 yellow lights moving through the darkness. I assumed another truck had pulled out of the facility, but the lights were positioned too close together and much too high off the ground. They followed me for several miles. Whenever I sped up, they sped up. Whenever I slowed for a washed-out section of road, they gained on me. I called 911, but my phone still had no signal. I grabbed the CB again. "Driver, if you're still listening, I've got someone behind me." The same man answered immediately. "Don't stop until the highway." "What is that place? You've still got the seal intact?" I checked the mirror. "As far as I know." "Keep it that way." "What's in my trailer?" The radio went silent. "Driver, what's in my trailer?" When he finally answered, his voice was barely audible. I never found out. The headlights behind me suddenly disappeared. There was no turnoff, no side road. 1 second they were there, reflected in every wet patch of gravel. The next, the road behind me was completely black. I reached the interstate shortly after 2:00 in the morning. The moment my tires hit the pavement, my phone regained service. 7 missed calls appeared at once. All of them were from my actual night dispatcher, Carl. I pulled beneath an overpass and called him. He answered before the first ring finished. "Dave, where the hell are you?" "Near the state line." "Didn't you reroute me?" "What are you talking about?" "The recovery assignment." "Oak Haven." There was a long silence. Then Carl said, "Dave, we've been trying to reach you for almost an hour. Your truck left the approved route, and your tracker stopped transmitting." I explained everything. Dispatch 4. The extra pay. The coordinates. The abandoned terminal. Carl searched the system while I spoke. He found no assignment. No call record. No dispatcher account named Dispatch 4. The 6-digit confirmation code I had received belonged to a canceled load from almost 9 years earlier. Carl told me to stay put and wait for highway patrol. A state trooper arrived about 40 minutes later. He checked the trailer doors with his flashlight. The seal was still intact, but there were fresh scratches around the latch, long, deep marks cut into the metal, as though someone had tried to pry it open without using a tool. There was also a muddy handprint on the right door. The print was unusually large, but the rain had washed away most of the detail. The trooper asked where the facility was located. I showed him the route from memory. When he searched the coordinates, his expression changed. He asked whether I was sure. I told him I was. According to county records, the Oak Haven transfer facility had closed in 1998 after a fire damaged the main warehouse. The access road had officially been closed for more than a decade. The trooper knew about the property. Local deputies occasionally responded to trespassing calls there. usually teenagers or people stripping copper from the buildings. But then he told me something else. 9 years earlier, a truck driver named Michael Turner had disappeared after leaving Interstate 15 during a storm. His tractor was found 3 days later near the Oak Haven facility. The cab was empty. The driver's side door was open. His trailer doors were also open, even though the security seal had reportedly been intact when he picked up the load. Michael Turner was never found. I asked the trooper what company Turner had driven for. He named mine. The next morning, Carl pulled the archived load associated with the confirmation number I had received. It belonged to Michael Turner. The driver number listed on the record was 2187. My driver number. The company had recycled it years after Turner disappeared. Management blamed the incident on a corrupted dispatch message. They said an old record might have been restored after a server update. That explanation might account for the load number. It doesn't explain the phone call. It doesn't explain the voice on the CB. And it doesn't explain what I found when I delivered my trailer in St. George. The receiver broke the seal in front of me. We opened the doors together. The appliances were still stacked exactly as they had been when I left Reno. Nothing appeared disturbed. But lying on the floor, just inside the trailer, was an old plastic company identification badge. The photograph had been damaged by water. The name was still readable, Michael Turner. I turned the badge over. Someone had scratched a message into the plastic. 3 words, "Don't take return." I handed the badge to my terminal manager. He told me he would send it to the police. A week later, when I asked what they had found, he claimed he had no idea what badge I was talking about. The incident disappeared from my company record. The extra pay offer was never added to my settlement, and no one at dispatch ever mentioned Oak Haven again. I still drive nights, although I avoid that section of Interstate 15 whenever the weather gets bad. Sometimes that isn't possible. A few months ago, I passed the same exit during another rainstorm. The old Oak Haven sign was gone. But as I drove by, my company tablet lit up. For less than a second, a notification appeared on the screen. Priority recovery load. Then it vanished. I didn't take the exit. I kept both hands on the wheel and drove until sunrise. These days, I verify every reroute directly with a dispatcher I know. I don't care how much additional pay is offered. Because I've learned that not every load in the system is meant to be delivered. And some dispatchers don't stop assigning jobs just because they're dead. My name is Mark Ellison, and I'm parked at a rest area a few miles outside Memphis, Tennessee, while I write this. Rain has been hitting the roof of my sleeper for most of the night. It used to help me sleep. Now, whenever it gets quiet between the heavier downpours, I find myself listening for the sound of a pen moving across paper. About 3 months ago, I finally saved enough money to buy my own truck. I had spent nearly 9 years driving company equipment, mostly Freightliners and Volvos. They were never mine, but if something broke, I could call maintenance and let the carrier deal with it. Becoming an owner-operator had always been the goal. More freedom. Better money. At least in theory. A truck I could set up exactly how I wanted. The problem was that a decent used rig cost more than I had managed to save. Every truck I looked at was either outside my budget or had enough miles on it to make me nervous. Then I found the Peterbilt. It was a dark blue 2014 Peterbilt 579 with a 72-inch sleeper, a Cummins engine, and a little under 900,000 miles on the odometer. High mileage, sure, but the service records looked clean. The truck had been listed in an online auction connected to a small equipment yard outside Amarillo, Texas. The photographs showed faded paint on the hood, some wear around the driver's seat, and a dent near the passenger side fuel tank. Nothing I couldn't live with. The final price was almost $12,000 below what similar trucks were selling for. That should have been my first warning. I called the auction yard before placing the bid. The man who answered said the truck had been repossessed after the previous owner stopped making payments. I asked whether it had been involved in an accident. He said there was no reported collision history. I asked why it was so cheap. He gave me the same answer people always give when they want to move a piece of equipment quickly. Bank wants it gone. I won the auction 2 days later. When I arrived in Amarillo, the Peterbilt was parked at the far end of the yard, away from the other tractors. It had already started raining. The yard manager handed me a folder containing the title paperwork, inspection records, and 2 keys. He barely looked at the truck. That struck me as odd, because most equipment guys love talking about engines, mileage, and whatever repairs they've recently completed. This guy just pointed toward it and said, "She starts." I climbed inside. The cab smelled stale, but not terrible. Old coffee, dust, and whatever cleaning chemicals the yard had used. The sleeper had a mattress, a small refrigerator, and a few storage cabinets. The previous owner had removed most of his belongings, although I found an empty water bottle under the passenger seat and a faded fuel receipt in one of the cup holders. The receipt was from a truck stop in West Memphis, Arkansas. It was 5 years old. I almost threw it away, but for some reason, I folded it and placed it in the paperwork folder. The truck fired up on the second attempt. The engine sounded healthy. The oil pressure held steady. No warning lights. I drove it to a shop in Amarillo and paid for a full inspection before heading home. The mechanic found a worn belt, a small air leak, and 2 tires that would need replacing soon. Nothing major. He told me I had gotten a good deal. For the first week, I believed him. I cleaned the truck, installed fresh bedding, and mounted my GPS and electronic logging device. I added a microwave, a coffee maker, and a small television in the sleeper. For the first time in my career, the cab felt like my space. My first few loads went smoothly. Dallas to Oklahoma City, Tulsa to Little Rock to Nashville. Then I began noticing the smell. It was strongest in the sleeper. Not rotten food, not diesel, not mildew exactly. It smelled like burned incense mixed with damp wood and old paper. I emptied every compartment. I pulled out the drawers, checked behind the refrigerator, and cleaned the vents. The smell remained. At first, it only appeared at night. During the day, with sunlight coming through the windshield and the sleeper curtains open, I barely noticed it. But once I parked and closed the curtains, the smell returned. Heavy, sweet, almost smoky. I bought an odor neutralizer at a Love's and sprayed the entire sleeper. For maybe an hour, all I could smell was artificial pine. Then, the old paper smell pushed through again. A few nights later, I was parked at a rest area off Interstate 40 in Arkansas when the smell became so strong that it woke me up. Rain was falling hard enough to shake the truck. I sat up and turned on the sleeper light. For a moment, I thought I saw something dark disappear beneath the lower bunk. I assumed it was a shadow from a passing vehicle. Still, I couldn't get back to sleep. The next morning, I decided to strip the sleeper down properly. I removed the bedding, lifted the mattress, and unscrewed part of the bunk frame so I could check beneath it. That's where I found the notebook. It had been pushed deep into a narrow space between the bunk platform and the sleeper wall. You wouldn't have seen it unless you were practically taking the bed apart. The cover was dark brown leather, cracked along the edges and swollen from moisture. A thin cord had been wrapped around it several times to keep it closed. At first, I thought it might be an old paper logbook. Before electronic logs became standard, drivers kept handwritten records of their hours, routes, and fuel stops. I expected to find mileage calculations or maintenance notes. Instead, the first page contained only a name: Caleb R. Dawson. Beneath it, someone had written, Unit 417. The number stopped me. A small metal plate on the side of my dash still showed the truck's original fleet number. 417. I searched the paperwork from the auction, but Caleb Dawson's name wasn't listed anywhere. The registered owner had been a small trucking company that no longer existed. I opened the notebook again. Most of the pages were filled with short entries. Each one began with a date, time, and location. June 14th, 1:12 a.m., I-40 East, mile marker 242. Man standing beside the guardrail. No face visible. Did not move as I passed. The next entry was from 2 days later, June 16th, 3:40 a.m. Rest area west of Knoxville. Someone walked around the truck twice. No footprints in the mud. I remember thinking that the previous driver must have been writing horror stories to entertain himself. Long-haul drivers do strange things to stay awake. Some record songs. Some talk to themselves. Some keep journals. Maybe Caleb had spent too many nights alone and turned every shadow into a story. I put the notebook in the cabinet above my bunk and forgot about it, or tried to. 2 days later, I was running east on Interstate 40 near mile marker 242. The location sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. It had been raining since Nashville, and visibility was poor. I was doing around 55, watching for standing water. As I rounded a curve, my headlights caught a person standing beyond the guardrail. A man, tall, wearing what looked like a gray hooded sweatshirt. He stood with his back to traffic, facing the trees. There was no vehicle nearby, no house, no exit. I passed him before I had time to think. In my passenger side mirror, I saw him turn his head toward the truck. The hood covered his face completely. I drove another mile before realizing why the location felt familiar. Mile marker 242. I told myself it was a coincidence. People break down. People walk along highways. Maybe he had climbed over the guardrail after his car slid into the trees. I considered calling highway patrol, but decided against it because I hadn't actually seen anyone in danger. That night, I parked at a Pilot outside Knoxville. I took the notebook from the cabinet and found the June 14 entry again. The mile marker matched. The direction matched. Even the weather was described in a note near the bottom of the page. Heavy rain. Poor visibility. 5 years earlier, Caleb Dawson had seen the same person at the same place. I read further. The entries followed routes I regularly drove. Truck stops in Arkansas. Rest areas in Tennessee. Warehouses outside Memphis. Some observations were ordinary. A black pickup following for 60 miles. A reefer trailer idling with no company markings. A woman standing between parked rigs without shoes. Others were harder to explain. July 1st, 2:08 a.m. Heard breathing from upper bunk. Truck was locked. July 2nd, 12:50 a.m. West Memphis Flying J white tractor, parked in space 37. Driver has not moved in 4 hours. I think he is watching me. I checked the date. July 2. That was the following night. The entry had been written 5 years ago, but the date matched my current calendar. I laughed at myself for noticing. Dates repeat. Routes repeat. Truckers stay at the same chain stops every year. There was nothing supernatural about it. The following evening, I picked up a load near Nashville and headed toward Memphis. By the time I reached West Memphis, my drive clock was nearly gone. The Flying J lot was packed. I circled twice before finding an open space near the back row. Space 38. The rain had started again. I backed in, set the brakes, and looked at the truck beside me. A white tractor occupied space 37. It was an older model with no visible company name on the door. Its engine was idling. The curtains were closed. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I considered moving, but the lot was full, and I had only a few minutes remaining on my legal drive time. I shut down, heated some food, and called my sister. We talked for about 20 minutes. During the call, I kept glancing at the white truck. Nothing moved inside it. No lights came on. No door opened. Around midnight, I climbed into the sleeper. The engine next to me continued idling. The vibration carried through the pavement and into my bunk. I tried watching television, but I couldn't focus. At 12:50, I opened the notebook. The entry for that exact time was already there. West Memphis Flying J white tractor parked in space 37. Driver has not moved in 4 hours. I think he is watching me. I had been parked for less than an hour, not 4. I checked the next line. It had been crossed out so heavily that the paper was nearly torn. Beneath it, Caleb had written, "Do not look through passenger curtain after 1:15. I looked at the clock. 1:07. I closed the notebook. For the next 8 minutes, I sat on the edge of the bunk, listening to the rain and the low rumble of the neighboring truck. At 1:15, its engine shut off. The sudden silence made the sleeper feel much smaller. I heard a door open outside, then close. I waited for footsteps. None came. A soft shadow moved across the passenger side curtain. Someone was standing between the trucks. I stayed still. The shadow didn't move. My phone was on the bunk beside me. I picked it up and opened the camera, thinking I could raise it above the curtain and record without exposing my face. Before I could, something lightly touched the passenger door. Not a knock. More like fingertips, dragging once across the metal. The notebook fell from my lap. It landed open on the floor. The back pages were blank when I had checked them earlier. Now there was writing on the final page. The ink looked fresh. July 2nd, 1:17 a.m. Mark is pretending he cannot hear me. My entire body went cold. I stared at the sentence. The handwriting looked disturbingly familiar. It leaned slightly to the right. The capital M had the same uneven middle stroke I always made. I flipped through the notebook, searching for other examples. The earlier entries were written in a narrow, careful hand. The new sentence looked exactly like mine. Another line slowly appeared beneath it, not all at once. The ink formed letter by letter, as if an invisible pen were moving across the paper. He will check the curtain. I dropped the notebook. The shadow remained outside the passenger door. My keys were hanging beside the driver's seat. I had to move from the sleeper into the cab to reach them. I considered calling 911, but what would I say? Someone might be standing beside my truck? I heard a faint metallic click. The passenger door handle moved downward. Once, then again. The truck was locked, but the handle continued moving slowly. The notebook lay open on the floor. A third line appeared. Caleb checked too. That did it. I lunged toward the driver's seat, turned the ignition, and hit the air horn. The horn blasted through the lot. Lights came on in several nearby trucks. The shadow vanished from the curtain. I released the brakes and pulled forward. I didn't even complete a proper walk around. I knew it was reckless, but every instinct in me was screaming to leave. As I turned out of the row, I looked toward Space 37. The white tractor was still there. Its passenger door stood open. There was no one beside it. There was no one inside the cab that I could see. What disturbed me most was the windshield. A word had been traced through the condensation from the inside. Mark. I drove across the lot and stopped near the fuel island where there were lights and people. A security employee came over, angry that I had pulled through the parking row so quickly. I explained that someone had tried my door. He agreed to check the nearby cameras. About 15 minutes later, he returned. He said the footage showed my truck and the white tractor beside it. At 1:14, the white truck's engine shut off. At 1:15, its passenger door opened. No one climbed out. The door remained open for almost 2 minutes, then closed by itself. He said no person appeared between the trucks at any point. I asked whether the white tractor was still there. He looked confused. According to the camera, it had been parked beside me when I arrived, but when security went to check the space, it was empty. No one had seen it leave. I didn't tell him about the notebook. I was already worried he thought I was sleep deprived or using something stronger than coffee. I drove to a well-lit rest area closer to Little Rock and parked near the entrance. The notebook remained on the sleeper floor. I didn't touch it until daylight. When the sun came up, I opened it again. The 3 lines from the previous night were still there. Mark is pretending he cannot hear me. He will check the curtain. Caleb checked too. Below them was a 4th line. Next stop, Little Rock Rest Area. I was already there. I closed the notebook and threw it into a trash can outside. Then I went inside, washed my face, and bought coffee. When I returned to the truck, the notebook was lying on the driver's seat. The cover was wet from the rain. I didn't pick it up. I used a pair of work gloves, carried it outside, and placed it in a metal trash barrel. Then I poured half a bottle of diesel treatment over it and lit it with a road flare. The leather caught slowly. The pages curled and turned black. I watched until nothing remained except ash and a piece of the metal clasp. For almost a week, everything was normal. The smell disappeared from the sleeper. I stopped waking up at every noise. I convinced myself that stress and exhaustion had affected my judgment. Maybe someone at the Flying J had played a prank. Maybe I had seen the writing before and forgotten it. Maybe the notebook returning to the seat had some obvious explanation I was too tired to notice. Then I started researching the truck's previous owner. The auction company refused to give me personal information, but the old fuel receipt provided a name. The loyalty number printed near the bottom was registered to Caleb Dawson. I searched local news reports. 5 years earlier, Caleb had been reported missing after failing to deliver a load in Memphis. His truck was found abandoned at a rest area near Little Rock. The driver's door was locked. His phone and wallet were still inside. Police found no sign of a struggle. The truck was later repossessed and sold twice before ending up at the auction yard where I bought it. One article included a photograph of Caleb. He was standing beside the same Peterbilt. Behind him, partially visible through the windshield, was a white tractor with no company markings. The article also mentioned something the police found in the sleeper: a damaged handwritten notebook. According to Caleb's family, it was returned to them with his other belongings. I contacted his older brother through social media. I didn't tell him everything. I only said I had recently purchased Caleb's old truck and found something that might have belonged to him. His brother called me the next day. The first thing he asked was whether I had found a brown leather notebook. I said yes. He went quiet. Then, he told me the notebook police returned to the family had been empty. Every page was blank. A few months after Caleb disappeared, his mother threw it away. I asked whether Caleb had ever mentioned seeing a white truck. His brother said Caleb had called him several times during his final month on the road. He believed someone was following him. Not a person. A truck, the same white tractor, kept appearing at different rest areas, sometimes hundreds of miles apart. Caleb said the driver never stepped outside. The last time they spoke, Caleb whispered that the truck had parked beside him. Then, the call ended. I sold the Peterbilt 2 weeks ago. I took a significant loss, but I didn't care. The buyer was a small, independent carrier from Missouri. He inspected the engine, checked the service history, and paid in cash. I almost warned him. Instead, I only said the sleeper had an odor problem during heavy rain. He laughed and told me all old trucks smelled strange. Last night, he called me. I nearly ignored the number because I didn't recognize it. When I answered, he asked whether I had left anything beneath the bunk. I told him no. He said he had found an old leather notebook pushed deep inside the frame. Then he asked who Caleb Dawson was. I hung up. The buyer has called 6 more times since then. I haven't answered. A text came through about an hour ago. It contained a photograph of the notebook opened to its final page. There were 2 fresh entries. The first listed the buyer's name, his current location, and the exact time he found the book. The second entry listed my name, Mark Ellison, Memphis, Tennessee, rest area, North Parking Row. 3:15 a.m. I checked the clock after reading it. It was 2:48. I considered leaving, but my drive clock is empty, and the rain has flooded part of the exit ramp. So I'm still here. It's 3:12 now. There's an empty parking space beside my passenger door. At least it was empty when I started writing this. A few minutes ago, I felt the sleeper floor begin to vibrate. An engine is idling next to me. I haven't opened the curtain. And somewhere beneath the lower bunk, I can hear pages slowly turning. My name is Sam Carter, and I'm parked at a truck stop outside Pendleton, Oregon, while I tell this story. Rain has been running down my windshield for the last hour, stretching the lights from the fuel island into long yellow lines. It has been almost 3 years since I worked for Harold Miller. Everyone called him Old Man Miller, although never where he could hear it. Miller owned a small trucking company outside Seattle. He had 7 tractors, mostly older Kenworths, along with a few dry vans and refrigerated trailers. He wasn't an easy man to work for. He checked everything: tires, seals, fuel receipts, log entries, cab condition. If you brought one of his trucks back with trash on the floor, he would make you clean the entire cab before handing over your settlement check. but the man knew every major highway, mountain pass, and logging road in the Pacific Northwest. He knew which truck stops filled before sunset. He knew where State Patrol liked to sit. He could tell when a mountain pass was about to close before the official weather alert appeared. I started driving for him after my previous carrier went under. On my first day, Miller brought me into his office. It was barely large enough for his desk, 2 chairs and a filing cabinet. Old paper road maps covered the walls. They were faded, folded, and marked with handwritten notes. He asked about my driving experience. I told him I had been behind the wheel for 6 years and had handled plenty of winter routes. He nodded, but he didn't look impressed. Then he walked over to a map of northern Washington. He pointed to a stretch of highway running through thick forest and foothills. "Ever run this road at night?" he asked. "A few times." He took a red marker and circled a small location on the map. "Rest Area 44. Listen carefully, Sam. You take your break wherever you need to. Truck stop, way station, wide shoulder if you have no other option. But you do not pull into this place after dark." I thought he was testing the new driver. What's wrong with it? Robberies? No. Drug activity? No. State Patrol hanging around? Miller capped the marker. "It isn't about the law." He looked directly at me. People stop there, and sometimes they don't come back out. I waited for him to smile. He didn't. "Come on, Miller. I'm not telling you a campfire story. If you're tired before you reach it, stop early. If you've already passed it, keep going until the next safe place. But don't park there after dark." Why hasn't the state closed it? Because most people stop there and leave just fine. That answer bothered me more than anything else he could have said. I asked what had happened to the others. His expression changed immediately. "You're being paid to move freight, not investigate things that don't concern you." Then, he sat down and started explaining the company fuel card policy as though the conversation had never happened. For the next 2 years, I followed his rule. Rest Area 44 wasn't impressive. It sat on the eastbound side of the highway between 2 long sections of forest. There was a restroom building, several picnic tables, and parking for maybe 15 cars and 6 tractor trailers. During daylight, it looked normal. At night, the entrance looked like a dark opening between the trees. I passed it dozens of times. Sometimes there were cars beneath the overhead lights. Sometimes a camper or another semi. Once, I saw a family eating lunch at one of the picnic tables. Nothing about the place seemed unusual. Still, I never stopped. Even when my eyes were heavy and my drive clock was nearly empty, I kept going. Miller's warning always came back to me. The night I finally ignored it was in late November. I was hauling refrigerated produce from Yakima to a distribution center north of Bellingham. The receiver had moved my appointment forward, and dispatch warned me that if I missed the window, I could be sitting until the next afternoon. The weather deteriorated faster than predicted. The temperature hovered just above freezing, so instead of snow, we got heavy rain mixed with sleet. Wind pushed through the trees hard enough to move the trailer toward the shoulder. My reefer unit ran continuously behind me. Usually, the steady hum helped me stay focused. That night, it made the exhaustion worse. I had been awake since early morning. My coffee was gone. My back hurt, my eyes burned, and every few minutes I had to blink hard to clear my vision. Around 1:30 in the morning, my low fuel warning came on. I still had enough diesel to reach the next station under normal conditions, but one exit had been closed because of flooding, and my navigation app showed a wreck near the next fuel stop. Rest Area 44 was less than 10 miles ahead. I considered stopping on the shoulder. That would have been dangerous. Visibility was poor, and water was already collecting along the edge of the road. A driver drifting out of the lane could easily hit a parked trailer. I called Miller. No answer. I called dispatch. The night dispatcher told me to use my judgment and reminded me not to violate my hours of service limit. That was easy advice to give from a warm office. By the time the rest area sign appeared, I had already touched the rumble strip twice. Rest area 1 mile. I could hear Miller's voice in my head. Don't pull into that place after dark. Then my eyes closed for maybe half a second. When I opened them, the truck was drifting toward the center line. I corrected hard enough to make the trailer sway. That decided it. A rest area was safer than falling asleep behind the wheel. I took the exit. The entrance ramp curved through dense trees. My headlights swept across wet trunks, thick brush, and water rushing along both sides of the pavement. When I reached the parking lot, it appeared empty. Several overhead lights were working, although one near the restroom kept flickering. Their pale glow reflected across the wet asphalt. I chose the first truck space near the exit. That way, I wouldn't need to back in, and I could leave quickly if the weather got worse. I set the brakes, but left the engine running. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. I leaned back and listened to the rain striking the roof. I almost laughed at myself. The place was just old and poorly maintained. Then I looked at the dashboard clock. 1:44 a.m. The number matched the rest area number. It was meaningless, but it still made me uncomfortable. I needed to use the restroom and splash cold water on my face. I put on my rain jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped out. The air smelled of wet pine, mud, and diesel exhaust from my own truck. There were no other engines, no doors closing, no voices. The storm should have made the place loud. Instead, the sound of the rain seemed strangely distant once I walked away from the truck. The restroom building stood about 50 yards across the lot. A covered walkway separated the men's and women's entrances. Between them was an information board covered with faded maps, safety notices, and old flyers. One photograph caught my attention. It showed a smiling man beside a red pickup. The flyer was weather damaged, but I could still read part of the heading. Missing, the bottom half had been torn away. I didn't stop to read the rest. Inside the men's restroom, one fluorescent light flickered above the sinks. The room smelled strongly of bleach. A yellow maintenance sign stood near the last stall, even though the floor was dry and there was no cleaning equipment nearby. I used the restroom and washed my hands. That was when I heard the thumping. 3 slow impacts came from behind the wall near the hand dryer. Thump, thump, thump. I stopped moving. The sound repeated. It didn't sound like plumbing. It sounded like someone striking the opposite side of the wall with the flat of a hand. I leaned closer. Hello? The thumping stopped. For several seconds, I heard only the buzzing fluorescent light. Then, a man's voice came from behind the wall. His tone was calm and conversational. I should have kept driving. I stepped back. The wall was concrete block. From what I had seen outside, there shouldn't have been another room behind it. The voice continued. I was tired. I thought I'd close my eyes for 10 minutes. Who's back there? I called. The man didn't respond to me. A second voice began speaking. A woman. I called my husband, but the phone kept calling my own number. Then another voice joined them. An older man. The road out brought me back here. The voices overlapped softly. They didn't seem to be talking to each other. Each person was telling a separate story. I saw someone beside my car. The ranger wouldn't look at me. My truck was still running. I couldn't find the highway. The calmness in their voices made it worse. I moved toward the exit. Just before I reached the door, one voice became louder than the others. It was rough and familiar. "Sam." I froze. The other voices stopped. Then the same voice said, "Don't go outside." It sounded like Miller. I turned toward the wall. Miller? A scraping sound came from the walkway outside, like wet shoes dragging slowly across concrete. The voice behind the wall spoke again. "That's how they know which truck is yours." I looked beneath the restroom door. A shadow blocked the light outside. Someone was standing directly in front of the entrance. The shadow didn't move. Then the door handle slowly lowered. Once, it rose again, then lowered a second time. I locked the door. The handle stopped. A gentle knock followed. "Sir?" A woman called from outside. "You left your headlights on." Her voice sounded normal, young, concerned. For a moment, I nearly opened the door. Then I remembered that I had intentionally left the headlights on. The woman knocked again. "Your trailer door is open." My trailer was sealed. I backed away from the entrance. There was a narrow window high on the wall. I climbed onto the edge of a sink and looked outside. My truck was still where I had parked it. At first, the lot appeared empty. Then, I noticed a vehicle beneath one of the far lights. An old green sedan. I was certain it had not been there when I arrived. Its driver's side door was open. A woman stood beside it. She wasn't looking toward the restroom. She was facing my truck. Near the tree line, I could make out two other figures. They stood several yards apart. One appeared to be a man wearing a raincoat. The other was much shorter, possibly a child. None of them moved. The rain fell heavily around them, but I couldn't see it touching their clothes. The woman outside the door spoke again. "You need to check your load." The voices behind the wall repeated her words, quietly at first. "You need to check your load." Then louder. "You need to check your load." I climbed down from the sink. At the far end of the restroom was a gray door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I pushed it open. It led to a narrow concrete path behind the building. The woods started less than 20 feet away. My truck was visible across the parking lot. The green sedan remained beneath the light. The woman beside it had turned toward me. I couldn't clearly see her face. I ran. My boots slipped on the wet pavement, but I kept moving. As I approached the truck, I saw someone standing near the driver's door. A man in a yellow raincoat. His back was turned. One hand rested against the side of the cab. I aimed my flashlight at him. "Hey." He slowly looked over his shoulder. The hood covered most of his face. What little skin I could see looked pale and swollen. Water ran from beneath the hood and down his chin. He raised one finger to his lips. Then he pointed toward the trees behind me. Something moved through the brush. I heard branches snapping. Not close enough to see. Close enough to know I wasn't alone. I climbed into the cab and locked the door. The man in the raincoat stepped away. He didn't chase me. He simply watched. I released the brakes and headed for the exit. In my mirrors, I saw the woman beside the sedan begin walking toward the truck lane. The two figures near the woods did the same. None of them ran. The exit lane curved through the trees. I accelerated. After maybe 30 seconds, the restroom building appeared through the windshield again. I was back in the parking lot. I hadn't turned. The road should have led directly to the highway. I stared at the building as I passed. The green sedan was still there. The woman stood several feet closer to the pavement. I tried the exit again. The lane curved through the forest. 30 seconds later, I returned to the same lot. This time, a white pickup was parked beside the sedan. Its driver's door was also open. I checked the GPS. It showed me traveling east in a straight line. According to the screen, I was already several miles away. But the restroom was directly in front of me. I made one more attempt. The same thing happened. The parking lot returned. The woman was now standing beside the truck lane. I stopped near the center of the lot. My reefer hummed behind me. Rain struck the windshield. The figures near the trees began moving closer. I thought about Miller's warning. People stop there, and sometimes they don't come back out. Then, I remembered something he had once told me about mountain driving. When your instruments disagree with what your eyes are showing you, trust the road beneath your tires. I shut off the GPS. Then, I switched off the headlights. The lot disappeared into darkness. I lowered the driver's side window. Cold rain blew into the cab. I listened. Behind me, the reefer unit rattled. To my right, I heard the electrical transformer beside the restroom. Farther away, beyond the trees, I heard the faint rush of highway traffic. The sound was coming from the opposite side of the lot. There was no public exit there. Only a narrow service lane blocked by 2 traffic cones and a chain. I restarted the headlights and turned the truck around. The woman near the sedan began walking faster. The figures at the tree line moved onto the pavement. I aimed the rig toward the service lane. The chain looked thin enough to break. I hit it at around 15 miles per hour. It snapped across the hood. Branches scraped both sides of the trailer as I forced the truck down the narrow lane. The service road dropped through the woods. In my mirrors, I occasionally saw pale movement behind the trailer. I couldn't tell whether people were following me or whether the rain and branches were playing tricks with the light. Then, the CB radio crackled. I hadn't used it all night. A voice came through. "Sam, stop the truck." It sounded like Miller. "You're going the wrong way." I picked up the microphone. "Where am I supposed to go?" Only static answered. Then Miller's voice returned, much quieter. "You should have listened." The service lane ended at a wooden maintenance gate. Beyond it, I could see real highway traffic moving through the storm. I didn't slow down. The truck broke through the gate and dropped onto the muddy shoulder. For a second, the trailer began to slide. I corrected, accelerated, and merged onto the highway. The moment I crossed the white line, the CB went silent. My GPS restarted. It showed that I was 12 miles past Rest Area 44. That made no sense. I had been inside the rest area for less than 40 minutes, and the service lane couldn't have been more than half a mile long. I kept driving until I found a 24-hour fuel station. I parked beneath the brightest lights available. My hands shook badly enough that I spilled coffee across the counter. The clerk asked whether I had been in an accident. I said I had taken the wrong maintenance road. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, I inspected the truck. The broken chain had dented the bumper. Branches had scratched the trailer. Several muddy handprints covered the rear doors. One of them was close to the top hinge, more than 8 feet above the ground. When I returned to Miller's yard 2 days later, he was waiting outside. He looked at the scratches before looking at me. "You stopped there." It wasn't a question. I told him what happened, the voices, the woman outside the restroom, the road bringing me back to the lot, the service lane. When I mentioned hearing his voice behind the wall, all the color left his face. He took me into his office and locked the door. Then he opened the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. Inside was an old photograph. It showed a younger Miller standing beside a red Kenworth with another man. The other man had Miller's heavy eyebrows and square jaw. "My brother Daniel," he said. Daniel had driven for Miller when the company first started. One winter night, he stopped at Rest Area 44 during freezing rain. His truck was found the next morning. Engine running, doors locked, phone, wallet, and coat still inside. Daniel was gone. State Patrol searched the forest, but found nothing. Miller later discovered that several other people had disappeared near the rest area over the years. Most of the cases had never been connected. Different years, different counties, different investigators. He tried to convince the state to close the place, but official inspections found no structural or safety problem. So Miller began warning his drivers. I asked how he knew I had stopped there before I told him. He reached deeper into the drawer and removed a small cassette recorder. "A call came through the office line that night," he said, at 1:44. The caller ID showed my phone number. My call history showed no outgoing call. Miller pressed play. For several seconds, the recording contained only static and rain. Then I heard my own voice. I should have kept driving. The woman from behind the restroom wall spoke next. I called my husband, but the phone kept calling my own number. Then another voice. Then another. Near the end of the recording, a man said, "Harold." He stopped here too. Miller stopped the tape. "That was Daniel," he said. I quit 2 weeks later. Not because I blamed Miller. I simply couldn't drive that route again. A year after I left, the state announced that Rest Area 44 was being temporarily closed because of plumbing and electrical problems. The closure eventually became permanent. The restroom building was demolished. Concrete barriers were placed across the entrance ramp. I thought that was the end of it. Last month, I took a load through northern Washington for another carrier. The old highway signs no longer mentioned Rest Area 44. As I passed the blocked entrance around 2 in the morning, the rain became heavier. My CB crackled. A man's voice said, "Sam, you can stop now." I didn't respond. A few miles later, I checked my passenger side mirror. Far behind me, through the rain, I could see several lights between the trees. They looked like the overhead lights of a rest area. I saw an old green sedan parked beneath one of them. Its driver's side door was open. A person stood beside it, facing the highway. Near the entrance, another figure stood holding something red in one hand. For a second, I thought it looked like Miller holding the marker he used on his office map. The following morning, I called his old company. The number had been disconnected. I searched his name online. Harold Miller had died 8 months earlier. His truck had been found near the concrete barriers where Rest Area 44 used to be. The engine was running. The doors were locked. His belongings were still inside. Miller was never found. So now, whenever I'm driving alone through heavy rain and see a rest area sign ahead, I check the number. Most of them are harmless. Places to stretch your legs, close your eyes, and get safely back on the road. But if I ever see the number 44 again, I won't care how tired I am. I won't care what my drive clock says. I'll keep both hands on the wheel. And I'll keep driving. My name is Leo Martinez, and I'm parked at a 24-hour fuel station in rural Nebraska while I tell this story. It's a little after 3 in the morning. Rain is moving across the lot in sheets, and every time a car pulls past my passenger side, I make a point not to look directly at the driver. That probably sounds ridiculous. 2 months ago, I would have thought the same thing. I've been driving professionally for almost 7 years. Most of that time has been long-haul work California produce headed east, manufactured parts going west, and whatever else dispatch could put behind my tractor. When you spend enough nights on the interstate, you see things that don't make sense at first. Headlights that seem to appear from nowhere. Animals standing too close to the roadway. Drivers who match your speed for miles before suddenly taking an exit. Most of it has an ordinary explanation. Fatigue, bad weather. Reflections in the glass. A driver staring too long at the same empty road. That's what I kept telling myself on the night this happened. I was hauling appliance parts from Salt Lake City to Omaha. The trailer wasn't particularly heavy, and my delivery appointment gave me enough time that I didn't need to rush. I had slept for almost 7 hours before starting my shift. I mention that because exhaustion is the first explanation everyone gives me when I tell them what I saw. I was tired. Sure, every driver is tired at 3 in the morning. But I wasn't nodding off. I wasn't seeing things at the edge of my vision. I was alert enough to remember every mile of that road. The weather had been bad since I crossed into Wyoming. Cold rain fell steadily, and wind gusts pushed against the side of the trailer whenever the highway opened into flatter ground. Traffic was light. Occasionally, a pickup or another semi passed in the left lane, but for long stretches. I was alone. Around 3:15 a.m., I stopped at a small travel plaza west of Laramie. I topped off both tanks, checked the tires, and cleaned the rain film from my mirrors. Inside, I bought coffee and a packaged sandwich. The cashier looked half asleep. We were the only 2 people in the store. While she rang up my coffee, she looked through the front windows toward my truck. "Someone riding with you?" she asked. No. She nodded toward the passenger side of the cab. I thought I saw somebody sitting over there. I glanced outside. The passenger seat was empty. The sleeper curtain was closed. It's probably my jacket. My dark raincoat was hanging from the back of the seat. The cashier looked again, then shrugged. Long night. I didn't think much of it. When I returned to the truck, I checked the passenger door anyway. Locked, nothing disturbed. I pulled back onto Interstate 80. For the first 15 minutes, everything felt normal. The coffee helped. I turned on a late-night radio show and settled into the right lane. The host was talking about highway closures somewhere farther east. Around mile marker 295, I saw headlights approaching in my driver's side mirror. They belonged to a dark sedan. At first, there was nothing unusual about it. The car was maybe half a mile behind me, moving slightly faster. I expected it to pass within a minute or 2. Instead, the sedan slowed as it reached the back of my trailer. Its headlights disappeared into my blind spot. I checked the hood mirror. The car was still there, positioned near the trailer's left rear corner. That's one of the most dangerous places for a vehicle to sit. If I needed to change lanes or avoid debris, I might not see it in time. I maintained my speed and waited for the driver to pass. They didn't. After about 2 miles, I eased off the throttle and dropped from 68 to 62. The sedan slowed with me. I returned to 68. The car accelerated and stayed in the same position. I became irritated before I became afraid. Drivers do this more often than you'd think. Some people get nervous passing a tractor trailer in rain. They pull alongside, hesitate, then hang around the trailer where the spray is worst. I tapped my brakes lightly. The sedan dropped back a few car lengths. Then, it returned to the same blind spot. I picked up the CB microphone. Westbound four-wheeler hanging off my left side. Either pass or back it down. I knew the driver couldn't hear me unless they had a radio, but speaking out loud made me feel less alone. A trucker several miles behind answered. "You talking about that black sedan?" "Yeah, you see him?" There was a pause. "I see your trailer. Don't see any car." I checked the mirror again. The sedan was clearly there, dark gray or black. Its headlights reflected off the wet pavement. It's right beside my tandems. "Negative," the trucker said. "Lane looks clear from here." I thought he was too far away, or the rain was blocking his view. "Copy that." I lowered the microphone. The sedan remained beside me. A green exit sign appeared ahead. The car's headlights washed over it, so I knew it wasn't just an image inside my mirror. I could see the vehicle's shadow moving across the signpost. I changed the angle of my mirror slightly. The car stayed visible. I turned on my left signal, hoping the driver would understand that I needed space. No response. I slowed again. This time, the sedan began moving forward. Its front bumper reached the trailer's midpoint, then the rear of my cab. The car's windows were dark, and rainwater streaked across them. I leaned forward, trying to see whether the driver was looking at the road. The sedan stopped advancing just before reaching my door. It matched my speed perfectly. I could now see its front passenger window from the corner of my eye. The inside appeared empty. I told myself not to look directly at it. There was no reason to. Just let the car pass. But every driver knows how difficult it is to ignore a vehicle sitting beside your cab. I wanted to know whether the person was impaired, distracted, or intentionally messing with me. I looked down. The sedan's cabin was dimly lit by the glow of its dashboard. A man sat behind the wheel. At first, I only saw the side of his face. Dark beard, black baseball cap, gray hooded sweatshirt. My stomach tightened. I was wearing a black cap and a gray sweatshirt. That alone meant nothing. Millions of men dress that way. Then the driver turned his head. I saw my own face. Not somebody who resembled me. Not a man with similar hair or features. It was my face exactly. The same trimmed beard. The small scar beside my left eyebrow. The mole beneath my right eye. Even the tired redness around my eyelids. He was holding the steering wheel with his left hand. On his wrist was a faded blue fabric bracelet. I looked down at my own wrist. The same bracelet was there. My younger sister had made it for me years earlier. I had never seen another one like it. The man stared back at me. His expression wasn't blank or threatening. He looked terrified, just as terrified as I felt. For several seconds, neither of us looked away. Rain hammered the roof. My windshield wipers moved back and forth. The radio continued playing quietly. Everything else seemed to disappear. The other Leo looked toward the road ahead, then back at me. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear him through the glass and the noise of the storm. He repeated the same words several times. I tried reading his lips. I couldn't make out the rest. He raised one hand and pointed forward. Then, he shook his head violently. "Don't what?" I shouted, even though he couldn't hear me. The other Leo looked toward the rear of his car. For the first time, I noticed someone sitting in the sedan's back seat. Only a shape, tall enough that its head almost touched the roof. It sat directly behind the driver. The figure leaned forward slightly. The other Leo saw it in his rearview mirror. His face changed. His eyes widened. He looked at me and mouthed the words again. This time, I understood. "Don't stop." The figure in the back seat raised its head. Before I could see its face, the sedan accelerated. It moved ahead of my truck faster than any normal car should have been able to on that wet road. Its taillights became two red blurs in the rain. Then they disappeared. Not gradually. 1 second they were there. The next, the highway ahead was empty. I held the wheel with both hands. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel it in my throat. I considered pulling onto the shoulder. Then I remembered what the other version of me had said. "Don't stop." So I kept driving. A few minutes later, the radio signal cut out. Static filled the cab. Through the static, I heard a voice. My own voice. "Leo, stay in the right lane." I reached for the volume knob and turned it down. The voice continued even after the radio was silent. "Stay in the right lane." It was coming from behind me. From the sleeper. I glanced toward the closed curtain. Something shifted on the other side. The mattress springs creaked. I told myself that cargo had moved in a storage compartment. The road was rough. Wind was shaking the cab. There was no one in the sleeper. I reached for the small control panel and switched on the sleeper light. A thin line of light appeared beneath the curtain. Two shadows moved across it, like a pair of feet standing behind the fabric. I nearly hit the brakes. "Don't stop." I kept my foot on the accelerator. My hands were trembling. I grabbed the CB again. "Any westbound driver near mile marker 310, I need a radio check." The same trucker from earlier responded. "I got you, driver." "You all right? Do you still have me in sight?" "Yeah, maybe a mile ahead of me." "Anything behind my cab?" "Anybody near the truck? Behind your cab?" "Just tell me what you see." There was a long pause. "I see your trailer. Anything else?" Another pause. Then he said, "You have someone in your passenger seat?" I looked toward it. The seat was empty. My raincoat still hung from the back. No, could have sworn I saw a head by the window. The sleeper curtain moved slightly, not from the road vibration. It bulged outward as if someone had pressed a hand against it from behind. I focused on the highway. The other driver called again. "Leo, you want me to come alongside?" I had never told him my name. My company name was on the truck, but my name wasn't displayed anywhere. "How do you know my name?" Static. Then my own voice came over the CB. "Stay in the right lane." The transmission ended. I dropped the microphone. The trucker's voice returned, but it sounded farther away. "Driver." I never said your name. The rain became heavier. Visibility dropped to maybe 200 feet. Ahead, orange construction signs appeared along the shoulder. Roadwork. Left lane closed ahead. That didn't make sense. The voice had told me to stay in the right lane, which should have been safe. But as I approached the first set of cones, I noticed something wrong. The construction signs faced slightly away from traffic, as if someone had dragged them into position. There were no work lights, no equipment, no flashing arrow board. The right lane appeared open, while cones blocked the left. I started moving toward the right. Then, I saw skid marks. Fresh black tire marks led from the right lane directly through the guardrail. A section of the road ahead had collapsed. Rainwater had washed out the shoulder and part of the pavement. The right lane ended in darkness. The voice had lied. I turned the wheel left. The trailer began to sway. For a second, I thought I had reacted too late. My steer tires crossed the center line just before the pavement disappeared beneath the right side of the truck. The trailer wheels struck 2 cones, but the rig stayed upright. I passed the washout in the left lane. In my passenger side mirror, I saw the broken road vanish behind me. Something stood at the edge of the collapse. A tall figure. Its head turned as I passed. The sleeper curtain snapped open. I looked back instinctively. The bunk was empty. The sleeper light was on. No one was there. My passenger seat was also empty, but the side window had fogged from the inside. Someone had drawn 4 words in the condensation. I tried to warn you. I didn't stop until I reached a staffed way station almost 30 miles later. Several trucks were already parked there because of the storm. I pulled into the inspection area and set the brakes. A state trooper approached the cab. He asked why I had entered so quickly. I told him about the washout. He radioed someone and listened for a moment. "There's no washout reported west of here," he said. "There is now. Right lane's gone around mile marker 318. He looked at me strangely. "You're east of 318. I know. That section is behind you by about 20 miles. That's what I'm telling you." He returned to his vehicle and made another call. A maintenance crew checked the highway. There was no collapsed roadway, no damaged guardrail, no construction cones. They found no sign that anything had happened. I considered telling the trooper about the sedan. I decided against it. He already looked like he was deciding whether I was safe to continue driving. I parked near the other trucks and remained there until daylight. When the rain stopped, I inspected my rig. 2 orange streaks marked the trailer tires where I had hit the cones. A fresh scrape ran along the passenger side fuel tank. Something had scratched the paint in 4 straight lines. They looked like fingernail marks. I checked my dash cam. The camera recorded the rain, the highway, and my reactions inside the cab. But the sedan never appeared. In the footage, I kept looking toward an empty lane. I watched myself stare out the window, shout at someone, and then jerk the truck left for no visible reason. The roadway remained intact. There were no cones, no washout. What disturbed me most happened during the moment I first saw the other driver. On the inward-facing camera, my passenger seat was visible behind me. A man was sitting there. He wore my cap, my gray sweatshirt, my blue bracelet. He was looking directly at the camera. I was also visible in the driver's seat at the same time. The passenger version of me raised one finger to his lips, then pointed toward the sleeper. A dark shape was standing behind the curtain. I shut off the video. The file corrupted immediately afterward. I took the truck to a dealership in Cheyenne and had the dashcam system inspected. The technician found no electrical fault. I replaced the camera anyway. For the next week, nothing unusual happened. Then, I received a call from dispatch. A driver had been involved in a fatal crash on Interstate 80. A black sedan had reportedly matched his speed for several miles before he lost control. Witnesses said the driver swerved suddenly and went through a guardrail. The accident happened near mile marker 318. I asked for the driver's name. Dispatch said it was someone from another carrier, a man named Daniel Reeves. I searched the crash online. A photograph showed Daniel smiling beside his truck. He looked nothing like me. But one detail in the report caught my attention. Daniel had called his wife shortly before the crash. He told her there was a sedan beside his truck. The driver looked exactly like him. I contacted the state patrol office that handled the accident. I didn't tell them what I had experienced. I only asked whether a second vehicle had been involved. They said no sedan appeared on traffic cameras. Daniel's truck had left the roadway by itself. His dash cam was recovered, but several minutes of footage were corrupted. I asked whether anyone had been found in the passenger seat. The trooper went quiet. Then, he asked how I knew about that. I ended the call. About a month later, my company reassigned the truck. I told them I wanted another tractor because I kept having electrical problems. That wasn't completely false. The sleeper lights sometimes turned on by themselves. The radio occasionally changed stations. Once, the passenger side seat belt clicked into place while I was driving alone. I'm in a different truck now. A newer model with fresh cameras and fewer miles. I haven't seen the sedan again. But last night, while parked near Lincoln, Nebraska, I reviewed footage from my new dash cam. At 3:30 in the morning, a dark sedan entered the lot. It parked several spaces away. The driver never got out. The recording showed me asleep in the sleeper for almost 2 hours. At 5:17, the sedan pulled away. As it passed the camera, the driver turned his head. It was me. He looked older than I do now. There was blood running from a cut near his left eyebrow. He raised one hand and pointed directly at the date displayed on the camera. Next Thursday. Then he mouthed 2 words. Don't drive. I checked next week's dispatch schedule. On Thursday night, I'm assigned a load heading west on Interstate 80 through Wyoming. I've already told dispatch that I won't take it. They think I'm being difficult. Maybe I am. Maybe everything I saw was stress, bad weather, and a damaged camera system. But I keep thinking about the other Leo. The fear on his face. The thing sitting behind him. And the warning he tried to give me. So when Thursday comes, this truck will stay parked. Because I've started to believe the man in that sedan isn't copying me. I think he's showing me what happens if I make the wrong choice. My name is Jeffrey Miller, although almost everyone calls me Jeff. I'm sitting in the sleeper of my truck outside Kansas City while I tell this story. Rain has been falling since sunset, and every few minutes I catch myself checking the trailer in my mirrors. I'm not hauling anything unusual tonight. Just boxed medical equipment headed to St. Louis. I watched the trailer being loaded. I counted every pallet. I photographed the freight, checked the seal number twice, and kept my own copy of the manifest. I do that with every load now. Before last month, I wasn't nearly as careful. I had been hauling freight for around 9 years, mostly electronics, medical supplies, and automotive components. After enough time in the industry, paperwork becomes routine. You receive the bill of lading. You confirm the trailer number. You compare the pallet count. You inspect the seal. Then you sign wherever they tell you to sign and get back on the road. With no-touch freight, the driver often never sees what is actually inside the trailer. The shipper loads it. The shipper seals it. You transport it. As long as the seal remains intact and the paperwork matches, whatever is behind those doors usually isn't your responsibility. At least, that's what I believed. The load that changed my mind originated at a private industrial facility outside Fort Wayne, Indiana. The rate was unusually good. It was a one-way run to a distribution center near Wichita, Kansas, and the broker described it as high-value automotive freight. The instructions were more detailed than normal. Arrive no earlier than 6 p.m. Bring identification. No passengers. No photography on the property. Keep all electronic devices inside the tractor. Do not open the trailer after sealing unless directed by law enforcement or facility security. That last instruction wasn't completely unheard of. High-value loads often have strict security procedures. Still, the wording felt unusually specific. When I arrived, a tall fence surrounded the entire facility. There was no company name on the building, only a street number beside the gate. Security cameras followed my truck as I approached the guard shack. The guard asked for my driver's license, carrier information, and pickup number. Then he made me switch off the engine and wait while he called someone inside. He didn't make conversation. He didn't even look at me after taking my documents. Around 10 minutes later, the gate opened. A security vehicle escorted me to a loading area behind the main building. The structure had no windows on that side. 6 loading bays lined the wall, but only one was open. A man wearing a dark suit stood beside the dock. He wasn't dressed like a warehouse employee. No safety vest, no work boots, no company badge that I could see. He motioned for me to back into Bay 4. Once I was against the dock, he approached the driver's side window. Remain inside the tractor until the loading process is complete. His voice was polite, but he didn't phrase it like a request. What am I hauling? I asked. Automotive components. Hazmat? No. Temperature controlled? No. Any special handling? Maintain continuous movement whenever legally possible. I looked toward the dock. Can I use the restroom while they load? There's a driver facility near the entrance. You may use it after the trailer has been sealed. He handed me a single sheet of paper. It listed 24 pallets of automotive components. Total weight, 31,860 pounds. The destination was a warehouse outside Wichita. The commodity code and purchase order number looked normal, but the shipper's name was printed as Midwest Logistics Division. That was generic enough to mean almost anything. There was also a section titled Driver Instructions. Do not alter the route without authorization. Do not leave the tractor unattended. Do not inspect or disturb individual freight units. Report any unusual sound, odor, or temperature variation immediately. I read the final instruction twice. Why would there be a temperature variation if this isn't refrigerated? The man in the suit looked at the manifest. Standard language. Then he walked away. The loading took just over an hour. I heard forklifts entering and leaving the trailer. Sometimes there would be several minutes of silence, followed by one heavy impact against the trailer floor. At one point, The entire tractor moved forward slightly, as if something much heavier than a standard pallet had been pushed against the front wall. I checked my air suspension gauge. The weight looked consistent with the paperwork. When the loading was finished, the man returned with 2 security guards. One guard closed the trailer doors. The other installed a metal bolt seal. The man held the seal number toward me so I could compare it with the paperwork. 784621, it matched. He asked me to sign the bill of lading. Before I did, I noticed that my full legal name had already been printed beneath the signature line: Jeffrey Allen Miller. Brokers often send driver information in advance, so that wasn't necessarily unusual. But beneath my name was another entry: date of birth, 0614/1982. I hadn't provided my birth date to the broker. At least, I didn't remember doing so. Why is my date of birth on the shipping document? The man looked down at it. Security verification. You already copied my license at the gate. Yes, so why print it on the freight paperwork? He stared at me for a moment. If you would prefer not to transport the load, we can release you. The rate was nearly double what I normally earned for that distance. I had insurance payments due at the end of the week. I signed. The guard returned my identification at the gate. As I pulled onto the highway, I checked the trailer in both mirrors. Nothing appeared wrong. The doors were closed. The seal reflected red in my marker lights. I headed west. For the first few hours, the run was completely normal. Traffic became lighter after Indianapolis. Rain started near the Illinois line and followed me through St. Louis around midnight. Dispatch sent a message asking for my location. I gave them my mile marker and estimated arrival time. A few minutes later, another message appeared. Do not arrive before 700. I replied that my appointment paperwork showed 5:30 a.m. Dispatch answered. Receiver requested delay. Park securely if needed. Do not break seal. Again, that wasn't completely unusual. Warehouse appointments change all the time. But the repeated warning about the seal made me uncomfortable. I stopped at a truck stop outside Columbia, Missouri. The lot was crowded, but I found a space near the fuel island. I walked around the rig with my flashlight. The seal was intact. The trailer tires looked fine. No fluid leaked beneath the doors. When I placed my hand against the side of the trailer, I felt a faint vibration. At first, I assumed it was coming from a reefer unit in the next row. But when that truck pulled away, the vibration continued. It felt almost like a low electrical hum passing through the aluminum wall. I stepped back. The trailer had no refrigeration equipment, no battery-powered liftgate, nothing that should have been producing a steady vibration. I put my ear near the wall. The sound stopped. A second later, something struck the inside of the trailer. One dull impact, not loud, just heavy. I moved toward the rear doors. The seal remained intact. I called dispatch. The night dispatcher answered after several rings. I heard something shift inside the trailer, I said. Is the seal damaged? No. Any visible damage? No. Trailer leaning? No. Then document it and continue. The shipper's paperwork says to report unusual sounds. There was a pause. What load number? I gave it to him. Another pause followed. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. Do not open that trailer. I wasn't planning to. Continue to the receiver. If the trailer becomes unsafe, contact law enforcement before breaking the seal. Do you know what's inside it? Automotive components. That's what the paperwork says. That's what the load is. He ended the call. I returned to the cab. For the next hour, I heard nothing unusual. I started convincing myself that a pallet had shifted slightly during braking. Then the weather worsened. By the time I crossed into Kansas, the rain was falling so heavily that my wipers could barely keep up. Wind pushed water across the highway in waves. I reduced my speed to around 45. There were almost no other vehicles. At approximately 3:20 a.m., I heard another impact. This one came from directly behind the sleeper. Then another. The sound wasn't random freight movement. 3 evenly spaced knocks came from inside the trailer. Knock, knock, knock. I turned down the radio. Nothing followed. A few minutes later, the same pattern repeated. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 2 more. My first thought was that someone had climbed inside the trailer during loading. Human trafficking happens. Cargo theft happens. Warehouse employees have been trapped inside trailers before. If there was a person back there, I couldn't ignore it. I called dispatch again. The call went directly to voicemail. I called the broker's emergency number. A recorded message said the number was no longer in service. That was when I noticed my trailer brake warning light flicker. It disappeared almost immediately, but I felt a slight pull from behind. The trailer shifted toward the shoulder. I corrected and reduced my speed. A few seconds later, the warning light appeared again. I needed a safe place to inspect the equipment. The next exit led to an old service station. The fuel pumps had been removed, and the main building was boarded up. But the concrete lot was wide enough for a tractor trailer. I pulled in and parked beneath the remains of a metal canopy. The rain struck it so loudly that I could barely hear the engine. I set the brakes and switched on my hazard lights. Before leaving the cab, I sent dispatch my location and wrote, "Inspecting trailer brake issue. Seal currently intact." I put on my rain jacket and stepped outside. The wind nearly pulled the door from my hand. Water was already collecting around the tires. I checked the air lines and electrical cable. Everything was connected. The brake chambers appeared normal. I walked along the driver's side, shining the flashlight beneath the trailer. Nothing dragged against the pavement. When I reached the rear doors, the knocking began again. 3 impacts. Then 2. I stood completely still. Is somebody in there? The rain hammered the roof. For several seconds, there was no answer. Then, something struck the door from the inside, hard enough to make both locking bars shake. I backed away. I called 911. The dispatcher asked for my location and the nature of the emergency. I explained that I was transporting sealed freight and believed someone might be trapped inside the trailer. She told me deputies were on the way. I waited beneath the canopy for almost 15 minutes. No patrol car appeared. The knocking stopped. Then, I smelled something. A metallic odor, faint at first, coming through the gap between the trailer doors. It reminded me of wet pennies. I checked my phone. No service. The 911 call had apparently connected before the signal disappeared, but I had no way to know whether they had received my location correctly. I walked around the lot looking for a better signal. Nothing. When I returned to the trailer, I saw that the seal had changed. The metal bolt still passed through the latch, but the number was no longer 784621. The number stamped into it was 061482. My date of birth. I checked the photograph I had taken at the shipper. The original seal clearly read 784621. I hadn't left the trailer unattended for more than 2 minutes. No one could have replaced a bolt seal that quickly without cutting it. I should have returned to the cab and driven away. Instead, I thought about the knocking. If someone was trapped inside, every minute mattered. I retrieved bolt cutters from my side compartment. Before cutting the seal, I recorded a video showing the altered number and explaining why I was opening the trailer. Then, I cut it. The metal bolt fell onto the pavement. I released the right locking bar. The door pressed outward slightly, as if the trailer were holding air pressure. A cold draft moved past me. The smell of wet cardboard and metal became stronger. I opened the door less than a foot and shone my flashlight inside. 24 pallets filled the trailer. They were arranged in 2 straight rows, shrink-wrapped and secured. Nothing appeared to have shifted. The nearest pallets carried printed labels: Automotive Assembly Unit 01, Automotive Assembly Unit 02. I opened the door wider. Hello? No response. The trailer floor was dry. I climbed inside. I knew entering alone was a bad idea, but I wanted to confirm no person was trapped between the pallets. I moved slowly along the narrow center gap. Units 3 through 12 were labeled normally. Then I reached Unit 13. The printed label read, Subject, Jeffrey Allen Miller Location, Kansas Status. In transit below, that was the current date. I stared at it, trying to understand what I was seeing. The label was not attached over an older one. The information had been printed directly onto the cardboard. Unit 14 carried another label. Subject, Jeffrey Allen Miller Location, Missouri Status. Resting Unit 15. Subject, Jeffrey Allen Miller Location, Illinois Status. Observed, I turned toward the open trailer door. The truck's hazard lights flashed red across the wet pavement. I could have climbed out. I should have. Instead, I cut a small opening in the shrink wrap around Unit 13. Inside were narrow cardboard boxes. I removed one. There was no product number, only a timestamp printed on the lid. 3:18 a.m. 2 minutes before I had heard the first knocking sound. I opened the box. A photograph lay inside. It showed my truck entering the abandoned service station. The image had been taken from above, looking down from the canopy. My headlights were on. Rain surrounded the tractor. I was visible through the windshield. I looked at the timestamp again. The picture had been printed before I arrived. I opened a second box. Another photograph. This one showed me standing behind the trailer with bolt cutters in my hand. The angle appeared to be from inside the trailer. The timestamp was 3:34 a.m. According to my phone, it was 3:31. The photograph showed something else. Behind me, near the boarded-up station, a man stood beneath the canopy. He wore a dark suit, the same kind of suit worn by the man at the shipping facility. I spun toward the open doors. No one stood outside. The lot was empty. I opened a third box. The photograph showed the inside of the trailer. I was standing beside Unit 13, holding the first 2 photographs. Behind me, at the front of the trailer, a person was partly visible between the pallets. The image was time-stamped 3:36, 4 minutes in the future. I slowly raised my flashlight and aimed it toward the front wall. At first, I saw nothing. Then, the light caught the edge of a shoe protruding from behind Unit 24. Who's there? The shoe moved out of sight. I backed toward the doors. A soft scraping sound came from the front of the trailer. Something was moving through the narrow space between the pallets and the wall. I didn't wait to see it. I jumped down, slammed both doors, and secured the locking bars without a seal. As I ran toward the cab, I noticed someone sitting in the passenger seat. A dark silhouette. I stopped several yards from the truck. Lightning illuminated the lot. The passenger seat was empty. My rain jacket hung behind it. I climbed inside and locked both doors. The moment I released the brakes, dispatch called. The night dispatcher sounded angry. "Why did you break the seal? I called you twice. Someone may be inside this trailer. No one is inside. How do you know?" "Jeff, listen carefully. Close the trailer and remain where you are. I'm not staying here. A recovery team is already heading to your location. Recovery team, do not drive to the receiver. What am I hauling?" He didn't answer. I found boxes with my name on them. The line went quiet. Then he said, "How many did you open?" "3. Another pause. "Did you look at the last photograph?" I looked at all 3. "No, the last photograph in the pallet. I didn't open every box." "Good." His relief frightened me more than anything else. "What is in the last one?" "Jeff, stay inside the tractor. Do not look in the mirrors. Do not open the doors for anyone unless they arrive in a marked law enforcement vehicle." The call disconnected. Headlights appeared at the entrance to the lot. A black SUV pulled in without flashing lights or company markings. A second SUV followed it. Neither vehicle had front license plates. 3 men stepped out. All wore dark raincoats. One of them walked toward my cab, holding up what looked like an identification card. I couldn't read it through the rain. He motioned for me to shut off the engine. I put the truck in gear. The man moved directly in front of the tractor. I sounded the air horn. He didn't react. The other 2 men approached the trailer. One carried a replacement seal. I turned hard and accelerated around the first SUV. My trailer clipped its front bumper. The men jumped back. I reached the highway and headed east. The black SUVs followed. For nearly 20 miles, they stayed several car lengths behind me. I called 911 again. This time, the call connected. I gave the dispatcher my direction, location, and truck description. She instructed me to continue toward a staffed way station where state troopers would meet me. As soon as I mentioned law enforcement, the SUVs slowed. They took the next exit and disappeared. I reached the way station shortly before sunrise. 2 state troopers and a county deputy were waiting. I explained the altered seal, the unusual labels, and the men who had followed me. The troopers opened the trailer while I remained near the patrol cars. After several minutes, one of them returned. "You said there were 24 pallets?" "Yes, there were 23. "What?" 23 pallets, all labeled automotive components. I walked to the trailer. Units 1 through 12 were in place. Then the labels continued with 14, 15, and 16. Unit 13 was missing. There was no empty space where it should have been. The remaining pallets had been arranged as though there had never been a 13th unit. The cut shrink wrap was gone. So were the boxes and photographs. The deputy searched the trailer. No person was found. The troopers inspected the seal I had cut. It carried the original number, 784621. My date of birth was no longer stamped into it. I showed them the photograph I had taken of the altered seal. The image on my phone was completely black. The video I recorded before opening the doors had no sound and displayed only static. The troopers contacted my carrier. Dispatch denied telling me to remain at the service station. They denied sending a recovery team. According to their phone records, no one from the company had called me during that period. I showed them my call history. The calls were gone. The only record was my 911 call. The carrier sent another driver to take the trailer to the receiver. I refused to continue with it. The next afternoon, my dispatcher called. He said the receiver had rejected the load because the pallet count was wrong. The shipping facility insisted that 24 pallets had been loaded. The second driver claimed only 23 were present when he arrived. My company blamed me for breaking the seal. They temporarily suspended me while their insurance department investigated. I contacted the facility in Indiana. The phone number on the paperwork connected to an answering service. The woman who answered said Midwest Logistics Division had never operated at that address. I searched the property online. According to county records, the building had been vacant for more than 4 years. I found photographs from a commercial real estate listing. The fence, guard shack, and loading bays were exactly as I remembered them. But the pictures showed weeds growing through the pavement and several broken windows. I drove back to the property 3 weeks later. The gate was chained shut. A faded for lease sign hung from the fence. The security cameras were gone. Through the gate, I could see Bay 4. A rusted trailer sat against the dock. I spoke to a man who worked at a business across the road. He said no company had used the building in years. I showed him a description of the man in the suit. The man's expression changed. He asked whether the suit had been dark blue and whether the man had a small scar near his chin. I said yes. He told me the building had once belonged to a contractor that handled government research shipments. One of the company's managers matched my description. His name was Raymond Cole. Cole disappeared after the company shut down. His car was found at a rest stop in Missouri. The keys were in the ignition. His phone and wallet were inside. The man across the road said police had searched the abandoned facility afterward. They found stacks of empty boxes in one loading bay. Each box had a person's name printed on it. Most of those people were truck drivers. I reported everything to my carrier. They told me not to contact them about the load again. A week later, the insurance investigation was closed without explanation. The suspension disappeared from my record. I was paid the full rate, plus an additional amount listed as a detention adjustment. I considered quitting. For nearly 3 weeks, I didn't accept another load. But trucking was how I paid my mortgage. Eventually, I returned to work. Since then, I've inspected every manifest carefully. I photograph every seal. I refuse loads from facilities that won't allow me to verify the shipper's identity. Nothing else happened until tonight. Before leaving the medical warehouse outside Kansas City, I counted the freight myself. 18 pallets. The bill of lading also listed 18. I watched the employee attach the seal. Everything matched. About an hour ago, I stopped here for fuel. While checking my paperwork, I noticed that a second page had been placed behind the manifest. I had never seen it before. It contains a list of 24 numbered units. The first 12 are labeled automotive components. Units 13 through 23 contain locations where I've driven during the past month. Unit 24 contains my full name. Below it is the address of this fuel station. The status line reads, subject parked. The next line reads, final image pending. A few minutes ago, something knocked from inside my trailer. 3 times. Then twice. The seal is still intact. I've already called the police. They said a unit is on the way. Until they arrive, I'm keeping the engine running and the doors locked. And no matter what I hear behind me, I'm not opening that trailer. Because I finally understand what was inside Unit 13. It wasn't documenting where I had already been. It was waiting to record what happened next. My name is Chris Dalton, and I'm parked at a small truck stop outside Ely, Nevada, while I tell this story. Rain is sliding down the windshield in long silver lines, and every time I see someone walking near the edge of the lot, I check the passenger door to make sure it's locked. I've been driving over the road for a little more than 10 years. During that time, I've developed a few rules. Never trust a quiet tire. Never ignore a strange vibration. Never park where you can't pull forward. And never pick up hitchhikers. That last rule came from experience, not my own, at first. Years ago, a driver I knew picked up a man outside Bakersfield. The passenger pulled a knife after 20 miles and made him empty his wallet at an abandoned exit. Another driver found a woman walking along an interstate in freezing weather. When he stopped, two men came out from behind a disabled car and tried to climb onto his running boards. After hearing enough stories like that, I stopped feeling guilty about passing people on the shoulder. If someone needed help, I called Highway Patrol. I didn't open the door. The night I broke that rule was 6 months ago. I was hauling packaged food from Sacramento to a distribution center outside Salt Lake City. The route took me east on Interstate 80 through northern Nevada. The trip should have been easy. The load was light. My appointment gave me plenty of time. The only problem was the weather. A storm moved in shortly after I passed Reno. At first, it was ordinary rain. Then the wind picked up, and visibility dropped until the highway seemed to end just beyond the hood. Water collected in the wheel tracks. Each time another truck passed, its spray covered my windshield and left me driving blind for several seconds. Traffic became lighter as the night went on. Around 1:30 in the morning, I crossed a long, empty stretch between exits. There were no truck stops, no towns, no streetlights, just dark desert on both sides of the highway. My headlights caught something near the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a reflector on a damaged sign. Then it moved. A man was walking beside the road. He wore a dark jacket and carried no bag. His head was down against the rain. As I approached, he turned and raised one hand. I passed him. My rule was simple: no hitchhikers. I watched him disappear in the passenger side mirror. Then I noticed how far he was from the last exit. At least 20 miles. The next one was even farther. The temperature had dropped into the 40s, and the man's clothes were completely soaked. I picked up my phone and tried calling Highway Patrol. No signal. I continued for another mile. My conscience started working against me. I imagined finding out the next morning that someone had died from exposure on that stretch. I slowed. There was a wide paved pull-off ahead, probably built for chain installation or emergency parking. I pulled onto it and stopped. The man appeared in my mirror several minutes later. He didn't run. He walked at the same slow pace until he reached the passenger door. I lowered the window only a few inches. "You hurt?" He shook his head. "Car breakdown?" Another shake of the head. "Where are you headed?" He looked east into the rain. Far enough. His voice was rough and quiet. I should have left. Instead, I unlocked the passenger door. "Get in. I'll take you to the next open place." He climbed into the cab. Water poured from his jacket onto the floor mat. He smelled like wet soil, cold smoke, and something metallic. Not blood exactly, more like old coins. He closed the door and stared through the windshield. Up close, he looked older than I first thought. Maybe late 50s. His beard had patches of gray. Deep lines surrounded his eyes. A narrow scar ran from his left ear toward his jaw. He carried no phone, wallet, or backpack that I could see. I merged back onto the interstate. For the first few miles, he said nothing. I tried making conversation. "What happened to your vehicle?" "No vehicle." "You walking from Reno?" "No. Where did you start?" He looked at me. "I don't remember." His answer made me uncomfortable. "Do you know your name?" After a pause, he said, "Ray, just Ray." "That's enough." I turned up the heater. He held both hands near the vent, but they didn't appear to tremble from the cold. His fingers were stained dark around the nails. After 10 minutes, I noticed something strange. His jacket was no longer dripping. The passenger floor was wet, but the fabric covering his shoulders still looked soaked. Water clung to it without falling. I told myself it was the light. The silence became heavier. The only sounds were the wipers, the tires on wet pavement, and the occasional rattle from the trailer. I checked my mirrors. No vehicles followed us. Ray watched the road. Every few minutes, he leaned forward as if searching for a particular landmark. "You know this area?" I asked. "Used to. You drive?" He looked toward the sleeper behind us. "Long time ago." "What kind of truck?" "White Freightliner." "What company?" He didn't answer. A green mile marker sign appeared beside the road. Ray watched it pass. 104, he said. "Yeah, slow down after 110. "Why?" "The bridge." "What bridge?" He turned back toward the windshield. "It doesn't always hold." I had checked the route before leaving Reno. There were no reported closures, no flood warnings. I asked whether he had seen damage earlier. He said nothing. A few minutes later, a pair of headlights appeared far behind us. They approached quickly. I assumed another truck was catching up. Then, Ray sat upright. "Don't let him pass." I looked at him. "What?" "Keep him behind you. I'm not blocking anybody in weather like this." The headlights came closer. It was a white tractor pulling a dark box trailer. The truck moved into the left lane. As it reached the back of my trailer, Ray pressed one hand against the passenger window. "No." His voice sounded different. Afraid, the white truck began passing. I glanced toward its cab. The driver's side window was dark. I couldn't see anyone behind the wheel. The truck moved alongside us. Ray slid lower in his seat. "Don't look at him." "I can't even see the driver." "He sees you." The white tractor reached my cab. For a second, lightning illuminated the road. I saw a man behind the wheel. He was staring directly at me. He looked exactly like Ray. Same beard, same scar, same dark jacket, but the driver's face was pale and swollen. His eyes appeared black beneath the cab lights. I looked back at my passenger. Ray was staring straight ahead. The white truck accelerated and disappeared into the rain. "What was that?" I asked. Ray didn't answer. "Was that you?" He slowly turned toward me. "No, then who was it?" "The next driver." I tightened my grip on the wheel. "What does that mean?" He reached inside his jacket. I immediately moved my right hand toward the tire iron I kept beside the seat. Ray noticed. I'm not going to hurt you." He removed a folded piece of yellow paper. The edges were soft and worn, like it had been opened hundreds of times. He held it toward me. I didn't take it. "What is that?" "A message." "For who?" "The next man who stops." "No, you stopped. That doesn't mean I'm taking anything. You already did." He placed the paper on the dashboard. "Keep driving until mile marker 112. You said something about a bridge. There's a pull-off before it. I'm not stopping again. You will." The certainty in his voice made me angry. "You don't know me. I know your name is Christopher Dalton." I felt the heat leave my face. I had never told him my last name. He continued. "You drive a blue Peterbilt. Your trailer number is 58914. You picked up 22 pallets in Sacramento. You're delivering at 7:00 tomorrow morning." I looked toward the dashboard. The paper remained folded. "How do you know that?" Ray stared at the windshield. "Because it was written down." "By who?" "The man before me." I considered pulling over and forcing him out. Then I remembered his warning. "Don't stop." I kept driving. Mile marker 108 passed. The rain intensified. Water struck the windshield so hard that the wipers seemed useless. The radio lost its signal. Ray spoke quietly. "When we reach the pull-off, you let me out." "And then?" "You read the note. You can tell me what it says. It won't say the same thing until I leave." That made no sense. I glanced at the paper. The top edge moved slightly in the air from the vents. "Why can't you stay until the next town?" "Because I never made it there." The road seemed to narrow around us. "What happened to you?" Ray looked down at his hands. "A driver picked me up near Reno." "When?" "I don't know anymore." "What happened?" He gave me the message. And I didn't believe it. Mile marker 110 appeared. Ray leaned forward. "Slow down." I reduced my speed. Through the rain, I saw orange lights ahead. At first, I thought they belonged to a road crew. Then I realized they were hazard lights from a vehicle parked on the shoulder. A white Freightliner sat at an angle beside the guardrail. The same truck that had passed us. Its driver's door was open. No one stood nearby. As we moved closer, Ray covered his face with one hand. "Don't stop for it." I kept going. The Freightliner's headlights were on. Its trailer leaned slightly toward the ditch. I could see dark lettering on the cab. Silver Creek Transport. That name triggered a memory. I had seen it in an old trucking forum. Silver Creek had gone out of business years earlier after one of its drivers disappeared in Nevada. I couldn't remember the details. We passed the truck. In my mirror, the open driver's door slowly swung shut. Mile marker 111 appeared. Ray pointed toward a paved pull-off ahead. "There. I'm not dropping you here. You have to. There's nothing here." "I know." I passed the entrance. Ray didn't argue. He simply looked at me. The engine lost power. My speed began dropping. I pressed the accelerator. Nothing happened. Warning lights flashed across the dashboard. The steering became heavy. I guided the truck onto the pull-off and set the brakes. The moment we stopped, the engine returned to normal. Every warning light disappeared. Ray opened the passenger door. "Wait," he paused. "What happens if I don't give the note to anyone? Someone else gives it to you. I already have it. Not this time." He stepped down into the rain. "Ray." He looked back. "What is this?" His expression softened. A chance to make a different choice. Then he closed the door. I watched him walk away from the truck. Instead of following the road, he crossed the pull-off and headed toward the desert. There were no trees, No buildings. Nothing but darkness and low brush. After a few seconds, my headlights no longer caught him. He was gone. I locked the passenger door. The yellow paper sat on the dashboard. For several minutes, I refused to touch it. Then, I unfolded it. The first line contained my full name, Christopher James Dalton. Below it were my truck number, trailer number, and load details. All accurate. The next section read, driver picked up at mile 92. Passenger identified A.S. Raymond Hale. Do not allow passenger to reach mile 112. I read that sentence again. Do not allow passenger to reach mile 112. Ray had asked me to drop him before it. Maybe he had been telling the truth. Below that was another message. Bridge failure at mile 112. Keep left. Do not stop for white Freightliner. I looked up. The road ahead was empty. I checked the navigation screen. Mile marker 112 was less than half a mile away. I put the truck in gear. As I returned to the interstate, my headlights caught Ray standing beside the road ahead. He should have been behind me. He faced the traffic with one thumb raised. I passed without slowing. He didn't turn his head. The highway curved. A concrete bridge came into view. Water rushed beneath it through a normally dry channel. The right lane was covered with muddy runoff. I moved into the left lane. As my tractor reached the bridge, part of the right shoulder collapsed. The pavement broke away and disappeared into the floodwater. Had I stayed in the right lane, my steer tires would have dropped into the washout. I crossed safely. In my mirrors, headlights appeared behind me. The white Freightliner emerged from the rain. It moved into the damaged right lane. For a moment, I thought it would follow me left. It didn't. The truck continued straight. Its front wheels left the pavement. The tractor tipped sharply and pulled the trailer through the broken guardrail. There was no sound over the storm. The entire rig disappeared into the darkness below the bridge. I called 911 as soon as I had service. I reported the collapsed shoulder and the truck that had gone over. State police told me to wait at the next exit. 2 troopers met me near a closed gas station. I gave them the mile marker and described the white Freightliner. 1 trooper drove back toward the bridge. The other remained with me. He asked whether I had seen the company name. Silver Creek Transport. His expression changed. Are you sure? Yes, he wrote it down. Around 40 minutes later, the first trooper returned. The shoulder had partially collapsed. Maintenance crews were closing the lane. But no truck had gone over the guardrail. They searched the channel and found no wreckage. I showed them the yellow note. The paper contained only one sentence. Thank you for the ride. My name, truck information, and the bridge warning were gone. I checked the passenger floor. It was dry. There was no water from Ray's clothes, no mud, no tobacco smell, nothing proving anyone had been there. The troopers asked how long I had been driving without rest. I told them I had started after a full break. They suggested I park until morning. I did. When daylight came, I searched for Silver Creek Transport. The company had closed in 1998. One of its drivers, Raymond Hale, had disappeared during a storm on Interstate 80. His white Freightliner was found beside the highway near mile marker 112. The driver's door was open. The engine was running. Hale was never found. A local newspaper article included a photograph. It was Ray. Same scar. Same beard. The article mentioned another detail. A trucker claimed he had picked Hale up near Reno several hours after Hale's abandoned tractor was discovered. The trucker said Hale handed him a note warning about a damaged bridge. Police dismissed the story because no bridge was damaged at the time. That driver disappeared 2 weeks later. His truck was found parked near the same pull-off where I had dropped Ray. I kept the yellow paper. For several weeks, it remained blank except for the thank you message. Then, new writing appeared. I noticed it while parked in Utah. A single line had been added beneath the first. The next driver will stop at 2:14 a.m. I tore the paper into pieces and threw them into a trash bin at a truck stop. The next morning, the note was back on my dashboard. It was folded exactly as Ray had left it. A second line had appeared. He will be driving a red Volvo. For the next month, I refused to pick up anyone. That wasn't difficult. I had already returned to my old rule. Then one night, while heading west through Nevada, I saw a red Volvo parked on the shoulder. Its hazard lights were flashing. The driver stood beside the truck, waving both arms. I called highway patrol and kept driving. 10 miles later, I saw the same red Volvo behind me. It caught up slowly and moved alongside my cab. The driver looked over. He was a young man, maybe 30. He held a folded yellow paper against the window. Written across it were 3 words: "Please pull over." I didn't. The Volvo fell behind and vanished into the rain. The next morning, I heard about a truck that had gone through a guardrail near mile marker 12. The driver survived. He told investigators that a hitchhiker had warned him to stay in the left lane. He described the man as Raymond Hale. I don't know whether Ray is saving drivers or using them to keep something moving. Maybe the note passes from one person to another. Maybe each driver gets one chance to follow the warning. Or maybe every warning creates the accident it claims to prevent. I only know that the note is still with me. It appeared in my glove compartment 3 days ago. There are 2 new lines written beneath my name. Pickup location, Ellie, Nevada. Next driver, Christopher Dalton. That is where I'm parked now. A few minutes ago, a man walked into the truck stop. He was soaked from the rain. He had a gray beard and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw. He bought nothing. He only stood near the entrance and looked out toward my truck. When he left, he started walking toward the highway. I haven't moved. I don't know whether I'm supposed to follow him, wait for someone else, or destroy the message again. But there is one thing I do know. Tonight, for the first time since this began, the note does not say I'm the driver who gives someone a ride. It says I'm the one waiting to be picked up. My name is Sam Mercer, and I'm parked at a truck stop just inside the Nevada state line while I tell this. Rain has been coming down for the last 2 hours. Every time my navigation system announces a route change, I mute it. I don't allow automatic rerouting anymore. I don't care whether the interstate is closed for 10 minutes or 10 hours. I wait. I've been driving over the road for nearly 8 years, and one thing trucking teaches you quickly is that saving time can cost you more than being late ever will. A road might look fine on a map, but have low clearances, weight restrictions, tight turns, or nowhere safe to turn around. That's why most experienced drivers use truck-specific navigation and still compare it with an atlas. You don't blindly trust a screen. I already knew that. I ignored it anyway. This happened about a month ago. I was hauling packaged medical supplies from a warehouse outside Elko, Nevada, to a distribution center near Salt Lake City. The trailer was sealed. The load was light. My appointment was early the following morning, and I had enough driving time to make it comfortably. At least, I did when I left the shipper. The weather changed shortly after sunset. A storm moved over northern Nevada faster than forecast. The rain became heavy enough to hide the lane markings, and wind pushed against the side of the trailer. Traffic slowed to around 40 miles an hour. Then, everything stopped. A multi-vehicle accident had blocked both eastbound lanes of Interstate 80. From the radio chatter, it sounded serious. One truck had crossed the median. Another trailer had rolled onto its side. Emergency vehicles were trying to reach the scene, but traffic already stretched for miles. I set the brakes and waited. My electronic log showed I had a little under 4 hours left on my driving clock. Dispatch sent a message asking whether I could still make the appointment. I replied that the interstate was completely blocked, and I didn't have an estimated reopening time. A few minutes later, my GPS chimed. Faster route available. Save 58 minutes. The alternate route left the interstate at the next exit, followed a county road south, then connected to another highway closer to Utah. The route looked reasonable on the screen. It was marked as suitable for commercial vehicles. There were no low clearance warnings or weight restrictions. Still, I didn't recognize the road number. I checked my paper atlas. The county road was shown, but only as a thin gray line. No truck route designation. I should have stayed where I was. Instead, I looked at the stopped traffic ahead and thought about my appointment. Missing it could mean waiting until the following afternoon to unload. That would cost me an entire day. I called dispatch. The night dispatcher told me the decision was mine. If your truck GPS says it's legal and you feel comfortable, take it. Otherwise, sit tight. I asked whether any company trucks had used that route before. He said he didn't know. That should have been enough. But I was tired, frustrated, and focused on making time. When traffic moved far enough for me to reach the exit, I took it. The ramp led to a 2-lane road beside an abandoned fuel station. The building was dark. Several windows were covered with plywood. An old sign still advertised diesel at a price that hadn't existed in 20 years. My GPS told me to continue for 63 miles. The first few miles were normal. The pavement was wet but maintained. There was a center line. Reflective markers guided the curves. A handful of ranch houses sat far back from the road. Then, the houses disappeared. The pavement narrowed. The shoulder became loose gravel. After around 20 minutes, the road markings grew faded. The rain continued hitting the windshield hard enough to drown out the sound of the engine. I slowed to 40. My navigation screen showed I was still following the correct route. According to the estimated arrival time, I had already saved 20 minutes. I started feeling better about the decision. Then, I passed a billboard. It leaned slightly toward the road, supported by rusted metal posts. The faded advertisement showed a red star above the words, Morrow's Service Food, Fuel, Rooms. The bottom line read, 12 miles ahead. Most of the paint had peeled away. I remembered the sign because the smiling cartoon mechanic had no face left. Rain and sun had erased everything except the shape of his cap and one raised thumb. A few minutes later, the asphalt changed. The smooth pavement ended at a rough seam. Beyond it, the road was cracked and patched. Some potholes were deep enough to damage a steer tire. I reduced my speed to around 30 miles an hour. "Nice shortcut," I muttered. The GPS showed another 48 miles before the next turn. There was no safe place to turn a tractor trailer around. The road had deep drainage ditches on both sides. Even if I found a wide spot, the wet ground could swallow the trailer tires. Going forward seemed safer. 10 minutes later, I passed another billboard. Moro's Service Food, Fuel, Rooms, 12 miles ahead. Same red star. Same faceless mechanic. Same rusted support post leaning toward the highway. I stared at it in the passenger side mirror. At first, I assumed the business had installed multiple identical signs. That wasn't unusual. An old gas station might have placed advertisements every 10 or 15 miles. But the damage looked exactly the same. A corner of the sign was folded backward. One support post had a white strip of paint near the ground. A dark stain ran down from the word rooms. I checked the trip meter. I had driven more than 9 miles since the first sign. The GPS still showed 48 miles remaining. I tapped the screen. It updated. 47 miles. I continued. The road climbed gradually into low hills. There were no intersections, no driveways, no power lines, only wet desert and dark rock beyond the headlights. I tried the CB. "Eastbound driver on County Road 12. Anybody copy? Static." I repeated the call. Nothing. My phone had no service. That wasn't unusual for rural Nevada, but the combination made me uneasy. I reduced the radio volume and listened to the truck. The engine sounded normal. The trailer tracked straight. No tire warnings appeared. About 12 minutes later, the billboard appeared again. Moro's Service, 12 miles ahead. This time I stopped. There was barely enough pavement to keep the truck clear of the ditch. I set the brakes and switched on the hazard lights. Rain hammered the roof. I picked up my flashlight and leaned toward the passenger window. The sign was identical, not similar. Identical, the same corner bent backward. The same white paint on the left support. The same dark streak below the lettering. I checked the trip meter. Since leaving the interstate, I had traveled 37 miles. The GPS claimed I was only 11 miles from the exit. I opened the route overview. The map took several seconds to load. When it did, the blue route line formed a straight path ahead, but my location marker was spinning in place. North, east, south, west, then north again. The navigation voice said, "Proceed to the route." I'm on the route. Recalculating, the screen briefly went black. When it returned, the road name had disappeared. Only a blank gray line remained. I considered calling 911, but my phone still showed no signal. I stepped out of the cab. Wind immediately pushed rain under my jacket. I walked to the front of the truck and looked at the road. Behind me, it curved into darkness. Ahead, it did the same. There were no tire tracks visible on the wet pavement except my own. That bothered me. The road was old, but it shouldn't have been completely unused. I returned to the cab and tried dispatch through the satellite system. The message remained pending. I entered a new destination manually. The nearest town. The GPS calculated for nearly a minute. Then it displayed, "No legal route found." I tried the original destination. Same response. The only blue line left on the screen continued forward. I released the brakes. A mile later, I found a gravel pull-off. It looked just wide enough to turn around if I backed carefully. I stopped and got out to inspect it. The gravel ended after around 20 feet. Beyond that was soft mud. My trailer tires would almost certainly sink. I continued east. The rain changed. It began striking the trailer with a sharper, metallic sound. At first, I assumed hail had started. But nothing bounced off the hood. Only rain hit the windshield. The metallic noise came from behind the cab. A tapping sound. Clack, pause, clack, pause, clack. It moved slowly along the driver's side of the trailer. I checked the mirror. Nothing was there. The tapping continued from panel to panel, moving toward the rear doors. I slowed to 25. The sound stopped. Then it started again on the passenger side. This time, it moved from the back of the trailer toward the cab. Clack, clack, clack. I turned on the work lights. The trailer wall was empty. No loose straps. No hanging branches. Nothing close enough to touch it. The tapping reached the front corner directly behind the sleeper. 3 heavy knocks struck the trailer. I felt them through the frame. I nearly stopped. Then, I remembered that I had opened the trailer only once since pickup, when the shipper sealed it. No one could be inside. At least, no one should have been. I called out over the CB again. Any driver on County Road 12, I need a radio check. Static answered. Then a weak voice broke through. Turn around. I grabbed the microphone. Driver, say again. Turn around before the station. The transmission faded. Where are you? No response. What station? Static. I tried several more times. Nothing. A minute later, my headlights caught the billboard again. But it had changed. The old advertisement still read, Morrow's service food, fuel, rooms. The distance underneath no longer said 12 miles. It said 1 mile ahead. I stopped breathing for a second. The GPS chimed. Destination ahead on right. I hadn't entered Morrow's service as a destination. I reached for the power button. The screen wouldn't turn off. I unplugged the unit from the dashboard. It remained lit. The blue route line continued toward a point 1 mile ahead. Rainwater ran down the windshield so heavily that the road looked submerged. The tapping started again. This time, it came from the rear doors. 5 quick knocks, then 5 more. Not random movement. Someone was signaling. I kept driving. The road began descending. Through the rain, I saw a dim red light ahead. Then, a second. An old roadside station appeared on the right. A rusted canopy covered 2 fuel pumps. A long, single-story building stood behind them. Several windows glowed with weak yellow light. The sign above the entrance read, Morrow's Service. A red neon star flickered on the roof. I slowed without meaning to. The GPS said, You have arrived. A man stood beneath the canopy. He wore a light-colored shirt and dark pants. He raised one arm as if waving me in. Another figure stood behind the station window. I couldn't make out the face. The parking area appeared large enough for several trucks, but it was completely empty. No cars. No tire tracks. No lights beyond the building. My fuel gauge showed half a tank. I had no reason to stop. I continued past. The man beneath the canopy lowered his arm. As the trailer passed him, he placed one hand against its side. I saw it clearly in the mirror. He didn't run alongside the truck. He remained still, yet his hand stayed pressed against the trailer for several seconds after I passed him. The tapping resumed directly behind my sleeper. I accelerated. The station disappeared in the rain. The GPS immediately announced, recalculating. Make a U-turn when possible. No chance. For the first time, the road widened slightly. I saw what looked like an intersecting lane ahead. I hoped it might connect back to the interstate. When I reached it, I discovered it wasn't an intersection. It was the entrance to the same station. Morrow's service stood on my right again. The red star flickered above the roof. The man remained beneath the canopy. This time, another person stood beside him. Both waved. I checked the trip meter. I had driven 7 miles since passing the station. I had not turned. There were no side roads. Yet I was back at the same place. I passed without slowing. The second figure stepped into the road after me. In the mirror, I watched him walk toward the trailer. The rear camera feed flickered. For one frame, I saw a face directly against the lens. Pale skin. Open mouth. Then the image returned to the empty road. I shut off the monitor. The trailer began shaking. Not violently, just a faint side-to-side movement, as if someone were walking inside and using the walls for balance. My load consisted of sealed cardboard cases strapped onto pallets. Nothing should have moved like that. I called 911 again. Still no service. The GPS displayed, continue for 12 miles. Then it added, do not stop. I had never seen that instruction before. The blue route line ended at a black section of map. I kept driving because I had no alternative. A thick layer of fog appeared ahead. It wasn't gradual. The road simply vanished into a solid white wall. My headlights reflected back so brightly that I could barely see the hood. I applied the brakes carefully. The trailer pushed sideways on the wet pavement. For one terrifying second, I felt it begin to come around. I released the brake, straightened the tractor, and brought the rig to a stop. The fog started less than 30 feet ahead. The road markings disappeared inside it. I could see no trees, reflectors, or pavement beyond that point, only white. The tapping stopped. The cab became completely silent, except for the engine and rain. Then someone knocked on the passenger door. 3 slow knocks. I turned toward it. No one stood outside. The window reflected only my face and the glowing GPS screen. 3 knocks came again. This time from the sleeper wall behind me. Then from the trailer. Farther back, a steady sequence began moving toward the rear doors. Clack, clack, clack. I switched on every exterior light. Nothing appeared in the mirrors. The fog moved closer. It rolled over the road toward the truck. My headlights reflected from it, making the air look thick and white. The GPS announced, proceed straight. I'm not going in there. Proceed straight. The tapping reached the rear doors. The locking bars rattled. Something pulled on them from the outside. I released the parking brakes and shifted into reverse. The backup alarm sounded. I could barely see anything behind the trailer. The road was narrow, and both ditches were deep. Backing a full rig in those conditions was reckless. Driving into the fog felt worse. I lowered the driver's window despite the rain and leaned out to watch the trailer tires. I reversed at walking speed. The tapping followed the trailer. Something moved beside it, just beyond the reach of my work lights. Every few seconds, I heard footsteps splashing through water. I never saw whoever was making them. After several hundred feet, the fog remained the same distance in front of the truck. It was following me. I increased my speed. The trailer moved dangerously close to the ditch. I corrected, straightened, and continued backing. The GPS began repeating, Wrong way. Wrong way. Wrong way. I tore it from the mount and threw it onto the sleeper floor. The screen stayed illuminated. A different voice came through its speaker, not the standard navigation voice. A man whispered, "Don't bring it back." I froze. The CB came alive. The same weak driver's voice I had heard earlier said, "Keep backing. Follow my lights." 2 headlights appeared in my driver's side mirror. A truck was behind me, facing the same direction I was backing. Its headlights flashed twice. I stopped. The truck backed away slowly, guiding me. I followed its lights. Whenever my trailer drifted too close to the edge, the driver flashed one headlight or the other. I couldn't see the truck clearly through the rain. Only 2 white headlights and amber marker lights above the windshield. We continued for what felt like miles. Then, the billboard appeared again. Morrow's service. But it was facing the wrong direction. The advertisement was visible to traffic leaving the road. The distance read, 12 miles behind you. As I backed past it, the tapping stopped. The fog began to recede. A few minutes later, red and blue lights appeared behind the guiding truck. The other vehicle vanished. One moment, its headlights were there. The next, the road was empty. A state trooper approached from the interstate entrance. He stopped his cruiser, activated every emergency light, and helped guide me into a wider area where I could turn around. Once I was facing forward, he came to my window. "What are you doing out here?" I explained the accident, the GPS shortcut, and the road. He looked confused. "This road doesn't connect through." My GPS said it did. It ends about 6 miles south. At the fog? At an abandoned quarry gate. I asked about Morrow's service. The trooper stared at me. "Where did you see that?" "Several miles back. Old station with a red star." He looked toward the road behind my trailer. "There hasn't been a building out here since before I was born." I showed him the GPS. The screen was black. It wouldn't power on. The route history contained no record of leaving Interstate 80. According to the unit, I had remained stationary in traffic for nearly 3 hours. My electronic log showed something different. It recorded 49 miles of driving. But there were no coordinates attached to that movement. The odometer confirmed I had traveled even farther. The trooper followed me back to the interstate. The accident had been cleared. Traffic was moving. Before I left, I asked whether he had seen another truck on the county road, the one that guided me backward. He shook his head. I was alone. The next morning, I searched for Morrow's service. I found one newspaper archive from 1963. The station had operated beside an old mining road. During a winter storm, a Greyhound bus and 2 trucks stopped there after the main highway closed. A flash flood washed out part of the access road during the night. By morning, the station, the bus, and both trucks were gone. Search crews found pieces of the fuel canopy several miles downstream. Most of the people were never recovered. One photograph showed the owner standing beneath the red star sign. He wore a light-colored shirt and dark pants. He was the man who had waved me into the station. Another article mentioned a truck driver who claimed he had escaped the flood by reversing nearly 4 miles along the access road. He said another truck guided him out through the storm. That truck was never identified. I delivered my load late. When the receiver opened the trailer, all 22 pallets were intact, but there were muddy handprints along the inside of both trailer doors. They started near the bottom and climbed almost to the roof. The seal had never been broken. My company inspected the trailer and found no explanation. I replaced the GPS. I stopped using automatic rerouting. For several weeks, nothing else happened. Then I found something in the sleeper. The dead GPS unit was sitting on my pillow. I had thrown it away at a truck stop in Utah. I was certain of that. The cracked screen displayed a single map. No roads, no town names, only a blue route line leading to a red star. Beneath it were 2 words: trip resumed. I removed the battery and left the unit in a locked side compartment. 3 nights ago, it powered on by itself. I could hear it speaking through the metal compartment wall. Faster route available. Since then, the red star has appeared closer each time I check the screen. Tonight, according to the map, it's less than 12 miles away. I'm parked on Interstate 80. There are no county roads nearby, no abandoned station, nothing except the truck stop and open desert. But about 10 minutes ago, a billboard appeared across the highway. I know it wasn't there when I parked. A red star is painted above a faceless mechanic. Underneath it are the words, Morrow's Service Food, Fuel, Rooms. And this time, the bottom line doesn't say 12 miles ahead. It says, next exit. My name is Leo Warren, and I'm parked at a rest area outside Omaha, Nebraska, while I tell this. It's raining tonight. Not hard, but steady enough that every sound outside the cab seems slightly distorted. About 20 minutes ago, another truck backed into the space beside me. The second I heard its reverse alarm, I started the engine and moved to the other end of the lot. I know that probably sounds ridiculous. A backup alarm is one of the most ordinary sounds in trucking. You hear them at warehouses, construction sites, loading docks, and truck stops. Most drivers barely notice them after a few years. I drove professionally for almost 11 years without giving that sound a second thought. Then, I spent one night at a distribution center outside Lincoln. Since then, I pay attention every time I hear one. This happened near the end of October. I was hauling steel brackets from a manufacturing plant in Ohio to a building supply distributor in Nebraska. The load wasn't complicated, but it was heavy. The trailer was close to the legal limit, and strong crosswinds had followed me through Iowa. By the time I reached Lincoln, I had been fighting the steering wheel for hours. My delivery appointment was scheduled for 7:00 the following morning. Dispatch had arranged overnight parking at the receiver, so I planned to back into a dock, shut down and sleep until the warehouse crew arrived. I reached the facility shortly after 1:30 a.m. The place was enormous. Several long warehouse buildings sat behind a chain link fence. Rows of loading docks covered the western wall. The main yard could probably hold more than 100 trailers, but that night, it was nearly empty. Only a handful of dropped trailers sat along the fence. No yard trucks were moving. No security vehicle made rounds. The only light came from fixtures mounted above every fourth dock. Most of them flickered in the rain. The instructions from dispatch said to use the intercom at the south gate. I stopped beside the call box and pressed the button. Nothing happened. I tried again. After several seconds, a man's voice answered through heavy static. Delivery? Yes, Warren Transport. Steel load from Ohio. Appointment? 7 a.m. There was a pause. Dock 38. Is overnight parking allowed? Another pause. You're already scheduled. the gate opened. That answer felt strange, but I assumed he meant my company had arranged it. I pulled inside. The yard pavement was uneven and covered with standing water. Faded numbers had been painted above the docks. Dock 38 was near the far end of the building, beside an unused section of the property where the pavement gave way to weeds and low trees. I drove past it once to set up my approach. While turning around, I noticed an old yellow yard tractor parked near the fence. Its windows were dark. The machine looked abandoned. One rear tire was flat, and rust covered the fifth wheel. I backed into Dock 38 without difficulty. My own tractor didn't have an exterior reverse alarm. Some trucks do, especially vocational equipment and yard tractors, but mine had never been fitted with one. Only the warehouse's yellow yard truck appeared to have a beeper mounted near its rear axle. I set the brakes, shut down the engine, and checked the trailer in my mirrors. The dock light above me flickered twice, then stayed on. I sent dispatch a message confirming my arrival. Then I walked around the truck. The trailer doors were still sealed. The tires looked fine. My kingpin and airlines were secure. The warehouse wall beside the dock had a small metal door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I tried the handle. Locked. There were no lights visible through the narrow window. The entire building seemed empty. I climbed back into the cab, locked both doors, and pulled the sleeper curtains closed. Rain tapped against the roof. I changed out of my wet jacket, set an alarm for 6:15, and lay down. I was exhausted enough that I should have fallen asleep immediately. Instead, I kept listening to the building. Warehouses are rarely completely silent. Even after hours, you hear refrigeration units, air compressors, roof vents, or distant forklifts. This place had none of that. Only rain. I was just beginning to drift off when I heard a reverse alarm. Beep, beep, beep. My eyes opened. The sound came from somewhere behind the trailer. I assumed the yard tractor had started moving. Maybe a night employee was repositioning equipment. The beeping continued for about 10 seconds. Then it stopped. I waited for the sound of an engine. Nothing. No diesel rumble. No tires passing through water. No air brakes. Only silence. I lifted the sleeper curtain and looked through the passenger side mirror. The yard tractor remained parked near the fence. Its lights were off. I checked the driver's mirror. No other vehicle was near my dock. The sound could have come from inside the warehouse. Forklifts often have backup alarms, and the thick concrete walls might have muffled their engines. I closed the curtain and lay back down. A few minutes later, the beeping started again. Beep, beep, beep this time. It sounded closer. Not behind the trailer. Beside it. The rhythm was slightly uneven. The first two beeps were normal. The third lasted a fraction longer. Beep, 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 then silence. I sat up. The air inside the cab suddenly felt too warm. I opened my phone and checked the time. 2:07 a.m. I looked through the driver's side window. Rainwater ran down the glass, distorting the dock lights. Nothing moved. I lowered the window slightly and listened. The yard was empty. Then the alarm sounded again, directly behind the sleeper. Beep, beep, beep. I jumped toward the dashboard. The keys were hanging from the ignition, but the electrical system was off. The transmission was in neutral. The parking brakes were set. The sound wasn't coming from my truck. I turned on the work lights. The area between the tractor and trailer became visible in the mirrors. No one was there. The beeping stopped. I picked up my flashlight and considered going outside. Before opening the door, I remembered the intercom operator. I called the number listed on my delivery paperwork. A recorded message said the warehouse office was closed. For after-hours security, it instructed drivers to contact an extension. I entered it. The phone rang for nearly a minute. No answer. I checked my dispatch messages. My arrival confirmation still showed as undelivered. Cell service inside the yard was weak. I sent another message. Anyone working receiver yard tonight? Hearing equipment near dock. The message remained pending. Then something tapped the rear wall of the sleeper. 3 light impacts. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The sleeper wall was less than 2 feet from the front of the trailer. No one could stand there unless they climbed onto the catwalk between the tractor and trailer. I reached beneath the bunk and pulled out the tire thumper I kept for inspections. The tapping came again. This time, lower. Tap, tap, tap. Then, the backup alarm answered from farther down the trailer. Beep, beep, beep. It sounded as though the noise had moved from the sleeper wall to the rear doors without crossing the space between. I pulled the curtain aside and checked both mirrors. Nothing. The rain was heavier now. Water reflected the dock lights across the yard. I could see the yellow yard tractor clearly. It hadn't moved. I decided to leave. Missing an unloading appointment was better than sitting in a dark yard with someone messing around outside my cab. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine cranked, but didn't start. I tried again. The starter turned normally. The engine wouldn't catch. That made no sense. The truck had run perfectly when I arrived. No warning lights had appeared. I checked the fuel level. More than half a tank. Battery voltage was normal. On the third attempt, the engine started. Air pressure began building. The backup alarm sounded again. But now, it came from beneath my own tractor. Beep, beep, beep. I looked at the transmission. Neutral. I had not released the brakes. My truck didn't even have a reverse beeper. Yet the sound was directly below the cab. I shut off the engine. The beeping continued. Beep, beep, beep. The final tone stretched into a rough mechanical whine. Underneath it, I heard something wet clicking against metal. It sounded like a tongue striking the roof of a mouth. I leaned away from the driver's door. A shadow moved across the pavement beside my front tire. It was long and narrow. At first, I assumed someone was walking past the truck. But the shadow moved backward, one stiff step at a time. Each time it stepped, the alarm sounded. Beep, step, beep, step, beep. The figure itself remained outside the reach of the dock light. Only its shadow crossed the pavement. It backed from the front of my tractor toward the trailer. Then it disappeared. I locked the doors again. My phone found enough signal to complete a call. I dialed 911. The dispatcher asked for the address. I read it from my paperwork and explained that someone was moving around my truck in a restricted distribution yard. Are they attempting to enter the vehicle? I don't know. I can't see them clearly. Do you have a description? Tall. Maybe. I've only seen a shadow. She asked whether I could safely drive toward the gate. I told her I was backed into a loading dock and needed time for the air pressure to build before moving. She advised me to stay locked inside and said deputies were being sent. As we spoke, a light switched on inside the warehouse. It shone through the small window in the personnel door beside my trailer. Someone passed behind it. I told the dispatcher there might be an employee inside. She asked me not to leave the cab. The warehouse light turned off. A second later, the personnel door opened. A man stepped into the rain. He wore a reflective safety vest over dark clothing. His head was lowered. I couldn't see his face. He walked toward the front of my truck. I pressed the air horn. He stopped. Then, he raised one hand and pointed toward the rear of the trailer. I opened the window less than an inch. "You work here?" He didn't answer. "Security is on the way." He continued pointing toward the trailer. "What's back there?" The man turned his head slightly. The reverse alarm sounded. Beep, his shoulders jerked backward. Beep. He took one stiff step away from the truck. Beep, another step. The sound wasn't coming from a machine. It came from him. His chest moved each time he produced the tone. He backed into the darkness between two dock lights. I raised the window and locked it. The man disappeared. The 911 dispatcher was still speaking through my phone. "Sir, what is happening?" "I don't know." "Do you still see the person?" "No. Stay inside the vehicle." Something struck the trailer doors. A heavy metallic crash. The trailer shook against the dock. Then came another impact. And another. The sound was too strong to be someone knocking with a hand. It sounded like a forklift hitting the doors from inside. My trailer was sealed. No one should have been in it. The dock plate had not been lowered. The warehouse had no access to the freight. I checked the passenger mirror. The trailer wall seemed to move. Not the entire trailer. Individual panels flexed outward one after another, starting at the rear and moving toward the cab. Each panel produced a dull bang. Bang, bang, bang. Something was traveling along the inside wall. I told the dispatcher there might be someone trapped inside the trailer. She asked whether I could see the seal. From the cab, I couldn't. She warned me not to open the trailer until deputies arrived. Then the passenger door handle moved. Once, twice, someone pulled it from outside. I held the tire thumper in both hands. The handle stopped. A face rose slowly into view beyond the passenger window. It belonged to the man in the safety vest. At least, I think it did. Rain ran across the glass between us. His skin looked pale beneath the dock light. His mouth hung slightly open. His eyes remained focused on the sleeper behind me. He didn't look at my face. He opened his mouth wider. Beep, the sound passed through the closed window. Beep, his jaw moved too slowly for the noise it made. Beep, a thin strand of dark fluid hung from his lower lip. I moved away from the door. He raised one finger and tapped the glass. 3 times. Tap, 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 then he lowered himself out of sight. I heard footsteps move backward through the water. Beep, step, the noise traveled toward the rear of the trailer. By then, my air tanks had reached enough pressure to move. I started the engine. The man appeared in the driver's mirror near the rear doors. He stood directly behind the trailer. If I pulled away from the dock, I risked hitting him. I pressed the horn again. He didn't move. Instead, he raised both arms like someone guiding a reversing truck. He motioned for me to back farther into the dock. I was already against it. The trailer couldn't move back another inch. He repeated the gesture. Back up. Back up. Back up. The reverse alarm sounded with every motion. Beep, beep, beep. Then the trailer moved. I felt a hard impact through the 5th wheel. The rig rolled backward despite the parking brakes. Only a few inches, but enough to slam the trailer against the dock bumper. I released the tractor brake while keeping the trailer brake set. I shifted into drive. The trailer resisted. For a second, it felt as though something inside the warehouse was holding it against the dock. I increased the throttle. The tractor pulled forward slightly, then stopped. Metal scraped behind me. The man continued directing me backward. The dock light flickered. For 1 second, the yard became completely dark. When the light returned, the man was gone. In his place stood the yellow yard tractor. It was directly behind my trailer. I had last seen it parked nearly 30 yards away with a flat tire. Now its headlights were on. No driver sat inside. Its engine wasn't running, yet its reverse lights glowed. The beeper sounded from beneath it. Beep, beep, beep. The yard tractor rolled backward. Slowly, without an engine. It moved away from my trailer and stopped near the edge of the property. I released both brakes and pulled forward. This time, the trailer came free. I didn't wait for the air pressure to reach its usual level. I moved carefully, but as quickly as the rig allowed. As I turned toward the gate, I checked the passenger mirror. The man in the vest stood on the dock where my trailer had been, his head tilted sharply to one side. The personnel door behind him was open. Beyond it, inside the warehouse, dozens of reflective safety vests hung in a row. At first, I thought they were hanging from hooks. Then they began turning toward the yard. Each vest had someone inside it, all standing completely still, all facing my truck. The reverse alarms began together. Beep, beep, beep. The overlapping sound filled the yard. I accelerated toward the gate. It was closed. I stopped several feet from it and pressed the intercom. No answer. The backup alarms continued behind me. In my mirrors, the figures were stepping away from the loading docks. Backward, all of them. Dozens of workers moved into the yard without turning around. Their movements were stiff and uneven. Each step produced another beep. I looked for another exit. A section of chain link fence beside the gate appeared newer than the rest. I considered driving through it. Before I could, the main gate began opening. I didn't know who activated it. I pulled onto the access road. A county sheriff's vehicle was approaching with emergency lights on. I stopped on the shoulder. The deputy parked behind me and came to the driver's window. I explained everything as clearly as I could. The strange alarm, the person outside the cab, the yard tractor moving, the figures coming out of the building. The deputy listened without interrupting. Then he asked me to confirm the facility's address. I handed him the delivery paperwork. He looked toward the gate. "What company are you delivering to?" I gave him the receiver's name. That company moved out of this building 2 years ago. I thought he had misunderstood. My appointment is here. Dispatch gave me this address. The deputy called the county communications center. While he spoke, I looked toward the warehouse. The gate was open. The yard beyond it was completely dark. No dock lights, no yellow tractor, no dropped trailers, nothing. The property looked abandoned. The deputy asked me to remain in the cab while he checked the site. Another patrol vehicle arrived. The 2 deputies entered through the gate. They returned about 15 minutes later. The warehouse doors were locked from the outside. Most of the loading docks had plywood covering them. There were no employees, no powered equipment, no signs that anyone had used the yard recently. Dock 38 had been sealed with a welded metal barrier. A truck could not physically back against it. I showed them the messages from dispatch. My arrival confirmation had finally delivered. The response read, Wrong facility. Do not enter property. The timestamp showed dispatch had sent it almost an hour earlier. My phone had not received it until after I left. The actual receiver was located 12 miles east. I called my dispatcher. He apologized for the outdated address in the system. Then he asked how I had entered the property. The south gate opened. That site doesn't have an automatic gate anymore. I spoke to someone through the intercom. There is no active intercom. The deputies inspected my truck and trailer. The seal was intact. There was no damage to the cargo. But the rear doors had dozens of small circular dents. They ran in 2 straight lines from the bottom of the doors to the top. Each dent was almost exactly the size of a human fingertip. The deputies also found something on the passenger window. 3 muddy fingerprints. They were placed higher than any normal person could reach from the ground. The top print was nearly 9 feet above the pavement. One deputy photographed them. The other searched the property records. The building had once operated as a farm equipment distribution center. Nearly 15 years earlier, a night shift employee had been killed in the yard. He had been walking behind a reversing truck when its backup alarm failed. The driver never saw him. After the accident, several employees reported hearing reverse alarms in empty sections of the yard. The company replaced every beeper on its equipment. The reports continued. According to an old local news article, workers eventually refused to take overnight shifts. The article included a photograph of the man who had died. His name was Aaron Pike. He wore a reflective vest. He had pale skin and close-cropped dark hair. It was the man I saw outside my passenger window. The company closed the location after another incident. A driver parked overnight at Dock 38 disappeared. His tractor was found idling in the yard the next morning. The trailer was still backed into the dock. The doors were open. His shoes were sitting on the trailer floor. No trace of him was ever found. The unusual part was where investigators found his truck keys. They were hanging inside the ignition. The transmission was in reverse. The parking brakes were released. But the truck had not moved. I delivered the steel load later that morning. The receiver inspected the cargo and found no damage. When they broke the seal, we discovered muddy footprints inside the trailer. They began at the rear doors. The prints traveled between the pallets toward the front wall. They stopped directly behind the sleeper cab. There were no returning prints. The receiver's supervisor blamed the shipper. The shipper insisted the trailer had been clean when loaded. I didn't argue. I just wanted the freight removed. For a while, I tried convincing myself that exhaustion had affected me. Maybe someone had been trespassing in the warehouse. Maybe the yard tractor's brakes had failed. Maybe the backup sounds came from hidden construction equipment. But none of that explained the figures, or the footprints, or how I backed into a dock that had been welded shut. 2 weeks after the delivery, my mechanic called during a routine inspection. He asked when I had installed a reverse alarm. I told him I hadn't. He found a small black beeper bolted beneath the rear crossmember of my tractor. The wiring didn't connect to the transmission. It didn't connect to anything. There were no manufacturer markings or serial numbers. He removed it and placed it on his workbench. While we were standing there, it beeped 3 times. It had no battery. We threw it into a metal disposal bin. The following morning, it was mounted beneath my truck again. I removed it myself. This time, I smashed it with a hammer and scattered the pieces in separate dumpsters. For almost a month, I heard nothing. Then, 3 nights ago, I was sleeping at a crowded truck stop in Iowa. At 2:07 a.m., something beeped beneath my cab. 3 slow tones. Beep, beep, beep. I looked outside. No trucks were moving. A muddy handprint appeared on the passenger window, then another above it, then a third near the top of the glass. I started the engine and left. The beeping followed me for nearly 20 miles. It didn't come from behind the truck. It came from inside the sleeper. I haven't slept in that tractor since. My company assigned me a different truck yesterday, a newer model. No mechanical problems, no exterior alarm. I inspected it myself before leaving the terminal. Tonight, I parked here outside Omaha. There are more than 30 trucks around me. Plenty of lights. Plenty of people. I thought I would finally be able to sleep. Then the truck beside me backed into its space. Its alarm sounded normally. Beep, beep, beep. After the driver shut down, another beeper answered from beneath my sleeper. Slower, rougher, trying to copy it. Beep, beep, beep. A few seconds ago, something tapped the rear wall of the cab. 3 times, and now, in my passenger mirror, I can see a man in a reflective vest standing behind my truck. He isn't looking at me. He's raising both hands and motioning for me to reverse. The problem is, there's another truck parked directly behind me. There's nowhere for me to go. But my transmission just shifted into reverse by itself. And the parking brakes are beginning to release. Those were tonight's 8 encounters. Which story unsettled you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If these stories gave you chills, hit the like button. It really helps us bring more realistic, atmospheric horror to your nights. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Nightmare Reads for more true, unsettling stories from the darkest roads. Until next time, stay alert, drive safe, and never ignore that feeling telling you something isn't right. We'll see you in the next one.